He also did his postgraduate diploma in public policy and management from IIM Bangalore. During his 25 years long service career, Sri Pathak has held many challenging assignments in central government ministries, urban local body, special purpose vehicle, government PSU and autonomous statutory bodies, etc. He has vast working experience of various government functions like accounts and finance functions, administrative functions, audit functions, regulatory and statutory functions, policy formulation and implementation, financial management, taxation, tender and contract management. Prior to joining PDB Technology Development Board, Sri Pathak has been holding the charge of member finance in Inland Waterways Authority of India and its statutory body under the Ministry of Road, Shipping and Waterways, Government of India. He had also served as officer on special duty to Member Finance, Telecom Commission and related to Secretary, Department of Telecommunications and Chairman, Telecom Commission. As Director, Wireless Finance in DOT, he had successfully conducted mega e-auction of the spectrums in October 2016. The 2016 spectrum auction was one of the most complex auctions of natural resources. Under his able leadership and guidance, the entire auction was conducted smoothly and transparently in a record time. The e-auction process was later awarded the excellence, second prize in category IT initiatives to ensure transparency in e-auction in the organization by CVC Central Vigilance Commission in the year 2017. We are fortunate to have him today with us. You must learn from my experience, vast experience, and particularly to the science and technology. So I request Pathak Sahab to please.
Thank you for introducing me so nicely. But these are all history, 25 or 26 years. Now I am here with Science and Technology Ministry, recently posted as Secretary Technology Development Board, and I am here on the capacity of that. Since I spoke in the morning, this idea of workshop came from that perspective that we should be hand-holding and supporting those entire ecosystem of entrepreneurs that we are. So TDB, along with the Department of Science and Technology, DST, we conceived this IIT PATNA to have this workshop. And I am fortunate that I have been given this opening session, that too after lunch. The Honorable Minister's speech, I don't know whether I will be able to do justice, but let's try. The idea of this session is to state exactly what Technology Development Board is doing and what are our parameters on which we function. And along with me, there are two deputies from my organization and must experience more than me. Because I am very new and as a secretary, I am not supposed to, or for that matter, time doesn't permit me to go into depth. There are two stalwarts from my organization who actually involved in the project evaluation stages. So, with your permission, I will call on dais Mr. Manish. He is a scientist. All electronics and related projects normally handled by Manish. And please. And Dr. Smitha, she is She is also alumnus of IIT Patna and her husband IIT Roorkee. So, IIT Patna, IIT Kanpur. and her husband in IIT Roorkee, so there are certain connections with me as far as Roorkee is concerned. So now let me start about our journey of Technology Development Board. Next slide, please. Can we change the slide? You can change the slide here. बात कर लीजिए भैया, चेंज करना तो कोई तो मैं नहीं कर दिया. So the agenda of today's discussion is that I should introduce Technology Development Board to encompass our business, what our objectives are, visions and objectives, the salient features of our TDB funding process, and what we have done so far, taking at a glance. And then evaluation process, we will give a little glimpses of that also. And we are the founder of DSC, that national award. That's a very unique award given by Government of India, Department of Science and Technology, every year on 11th May. And this award started in 1999, followed by the event, which we all know, that 11th May, the Pokhran blast took place in 1998. To celebrate this day, India is celebrating Technology Day on 11th May. And we gave the Technology Award in 3 categories that will come later. And our success stories will astonish to know. I just said few stories in the morning. You can see the glimpses of success stories of TDB. And in fact, one of my Tanmay, are you here? Tanmay was here. I would say. Okay, probably he's outside. Okay, Abanish, next. Yeah, so this Technology Development Board came into existence in 1996, 1st September. Last year we celebrated 25th year silver jubilee. In fact, some figures are really mind-boggling if you see. India, and after independence in I think 1945, you can Google it search, was some sort of vision document on science, and it was not technology involved at that point of time. Only vision document of science was published. They wanted to go exactly a year. Then it took almost 25 years after independence, 1947, for Government of India to realize that we need a separate Department of Science and Technology at Central. During those years, as R.K. Singh Sahab said, during those years, our challenges, our priority was different. And it was thought that you just focus on science, basic research, technology and etc. will come automatically, which was not the case, which is true. So 1971, DST was formed. And the next policy statement on this entire science and technology came again after 25 years in 83. So we came National Science Policy as such. That time also technology was not in the realm of that policy. The real policy on technology, involving technology, came in 2003, again 20 years after that 83 policy, where the first time science and technology was clubbed together. And then after 10 years, the new policy which is currently in existence, Science, Technology and Innovation, STIP we call it. So a few days back I was discussing with the person Akhilesh Gupta ji, who is involved with the policy formulation in DST. I said, I had certain knowledge of policy formulation. I was associated with 2 policy formulation in Government of India, especially telecom, National Telecom Policy 2012. And a new DC, Digital Communication Policy of 2018. One was at the capacity of OSD to chairperson at that point of time, so all aspects I was involved in. And second was a spectrum related to committee I headed for this policy. So I said, still you are thinking STIPI, innovation was last decade's phenomenon. Now nobody is talking about innovation. We have gone. Innovation is of course the foundation and the base of everything. But we are not talking about entrepreneurship. So why don't you change this and make it a step towards the future of India? Say science and technology entrepreneur policy. So your policy should be directed towards achieving that goal, how innovation gets converted into entrepreneurs. So your entire paradigm shift will be there and the policy focus. So you can say it is a stepping stone for the future. He has said it's a good idea, let's work on this. You can think of, I'm just giving you an idea. So from that journey I just told you only because to give you a little glimpses how we traveled 75 years as far as the science and technology course is concerned. This organization came in existence in 1996 through an act of 1995 precisely for one reason, that how to promote commercialization of indigenous technology in India. So Government of India in 1986 introduced one R&D Cess Act, which was repealed now in 2017 after GST came into existence. That through that Cess, the government says that any imported machinery or anything you are importing for technology related field, you will pay 5%, maximum 5% of that value to Government of India as a cess. And this fund will be utilized for development of technology, commercialization, indigenous technology development in India. And that fund was given as a venture capital to IDBI during that point of time till 1995. Then government thought of that IDBI is still thinking from the banker perspective. It is not coming to help that industry or for the kind of help they require. So they set up an act, and through this act, a statutory body called Technology Development Board, and started functioning from 1st of September 1996. And as I told you, that our journey started with so many projects, but few projects which I have named in the morning, I will come to the details. That vaccine ecosystem development started from 96, 97, 98 for funding those companies. Next slide, please, Manish. So that mission, vision and mandate, next slide. So our goal is to make the weak zone. Why we call weak zone? Because ultimate requirement of fund or support one needs at a point of time when you want to make it production for commercialization. As far as R&D is concerned, research, there are various organizations across the spectrum, not only in the central government, state government also gives you support. But once it comes to commercialization, there was no other except bank. So that was a very weak zone of technology development and commercialization because all these innovations come with a strong risk. So somebody was there to absorb the risk, which we did it. And we funded all those risky projects. Next. At the risk of failure also. So we take that risk. So it is not that your project go bust or something. It may possible that you have a fantastic idea, you have a fantastic product, but probably the product was well ahead of its time. One example is River. That point of time when we funded a very good project, and all those but way ahead of its time. Now we are thinking of EV vehicles and etc. etc. So that can happen. You have a good product, but there is no market for that, which you have anticipated as a researcher, as an innovator. Probably you are not attuned to that market reality. Okay. So our objective is threefold. We basically fostering innovation first, and then import substitution. It is not that we are funding some of the project where there is a high import substitution is there. And third is invested in strategic sectors. So all three sectors we are involved, and we are involved in a big way in all those. So maybe for the first, you see the fostering innovation, the promote frontier market oriented technology in deep tech area where normally others are not venturing, where venture capital etc. capitalists also they do not want to go into that deep tech areas, but we do. And we help you for the product development also. For example, if you have certain concept, you came out for a prototype, again you need to research on that and develop the product. Also we support, we help. And with industries, global players and all those, etc. So that I'm not going into much detail about it. Manish will talk to you later on the project funding and etc. Details will come. Please go next. Just to give you glimpses of it, we are funding the project 5% simple interest. That too, once your project is completed, your product is ready to hit market. So you have hit the market, then 1 year moratorium is given because any product needs time to sell in the market. So that we don't say anything. After that, again 4.5 years, very long gestation period is given. And through your sales, you return back my money, so that I roll on to give other needies. We believe in TDB that entrepreneurs cannot be made through grants. If you give grants, there are many organizations government of India is doing, but they are basically killing innovations. Because many of them are saying, oh, easy available money, भारत सरकार की ये स्कीम में आ जाओ, इसके साथ पैसे लेते हैं, पैसे ले लिया, वो उसके अपने पैसे लगने नहीं है, बने तो बने, नहीं बने तो भाई ठीक है. We don't believe it, because we only fund those projects where your involvement is really. That's why I always say entrepreneurs cannot be developed by talking. Unless you are madness, you cannot be an entrepreneur. You have to be mad about your thinking, you have to be mad about your projects. And दुनिया की आपको परवाह किए बगैर उसमें लगना होगा, तभी आप entrepreneur बन सकते हैं. That's the first lesson which, according to me. Then the project evaluation stages, we give hand holding. We don't charge anything. So if you have any concept, any products at advanced level, we don't fund in TRL 1 to 7 or 1 to, because there is a research stage prototyping. This is kind of 7, 8, 9, that level. And our project evaluation team consists of experts of technical as well as financial. They give you hand holding. They will guide you. So if you have product at certain rough edges, they will smoothen you. During the implementation, if any technological problem comes or any financial issues come, they will help you. They will help you in many ways. So we give hand holding. It is not that as a bank, मैंने पैसे दे दिया, पैसे वापस आपके पीछे पड़ गए, ऐसा नहीं है. We will be continuing with you and give a sort of, suppose you need another some time to develop the product, we say okay, we evaluate through those committee and give you that time also. So very flexible in that. And this scheme is open throughout the year, 24/7 by website. Anybody has a good product, sometime I always tell, ऐसे हम कोई पैसे चार्ज नहीं करते, तो हमारे पास ऐसे ऐसे प्रोजेक्ट आ जाते हैं जो, और समय हमको सभी प्रोजेक्ट को देना है. यदि हमको कोई प्रोजेक्ट रिजेक्ट भी करना है तो हम खुद टीवी नहीं करते. इवन मुझे पता है फर्स्ट ग्लास देखने का प्रोजेक्ट में कुछ दम नहीं है, लेकिन एज पर एक्ट हम नहीं करते. उसको हम फिर एक्सपर्ट का सेटअप करेंगे, वो फिर गाइड करेंगे उस बच्चे को या उस कंपनी को. यदि वो फिर भी नहीं कर पाता, देन ओनली वी क्लोज द प्रोजेक्ट. सो हमें बेसिकली ज्यादा समय वैसे प्रोजेक्ट्स को देने पड़ते हैं जो जिसमें फेलियर्स ज्यादा होते हैं, जो थ्रू नहीं होता. जो थ्रू होने वाले प्रोजेक्ट है तो बहुत जल्दी हो जाते हैं हमारे, बिकॉज उसके सारे के सारे डेटास और रिक्वायर्ड सर्टिफिकेशंस वो सब कुछ करा के आया होता है. तो हम कोई पैसे चार्ज नहीं करते. थ्रू आउट 24/7 आप अप्लाई करिए, आपके प्रोजेक्ट हम लोग इवेल्युएट करेंगे. तो यदि आपके पास कोई ऐसा आइडिया है, उसमें मैं बार बार दूसरी बात कहता हूँ कि आपको लग रहा है कुछ आइडिया है, कुछ प्रोजेक्ट बनाया, लेकिन उसमें कुछ कमी है, अप्लाई कर दो, हमारे यहाँ से आपको गाइडेंस मिल जाएगी फ्री में, आप उसको यूज करो, फिर आगे बढ़ जाओ। आपको सोच के आश्चर्य होगा कि हमारे यहाँ की इवैल्यूएशन करने के बाद बहुत सारे वेंचर कैपिटलिस्ट बैठे हुए हैं कि टीडीपी का इवैल्यूएशन हो गया, नाउ डोंट टेक फंड फ्रॉम गवर्नमेंट, नाउ आई एम फंडिंग। और ऐसे मेरे पास अनेकों केस हैं, बेस्ट अपॉर्ट, बिकॉज दे नो कि the kind of techno-financial evolution we do, they themselves cannot do it. So they rely on our, and for as far as I am concerned, we are all taxpayers' money. My only aim is to develop that innovation, hit the market. If it is hitting the market without government support, that is most welcome. My only expenses is the kind of revenue or kind of expenses we did through travel of those experts for project evaluation and all those stages. That is my expense, that's fine. So this is happening. So आपके यहाँ ऐसे भी किसी को भी कुछ प्रोजेक्ट आइडिया है, और जब मैं देख रहा था बाहर बहुत सारे लगे हुए हैं, आपको आफ्टर टुमारो से जो भी सेशंस होगा, डीएसटी के सारे एक्सपर्ट्स होंगे, आपसे एडवाइस करेंगे कैसे प्रोजेक्ट बनाना है। हमारे दो चैंपियंस यहाँ बैठे हुए अभी आपको बताएंगे, मैं इनके डोमेन में नहीं जाऊँगा, मैं सेक्रेटरी और मुझे इतनी पता क्या है, बोल के निकल लूँगा, असल में इन्हीं को बताना है, क्योंकि प्रोजेक्ट इन्हीं एवेल्यूएट करना है, मुझे तो करनी नहीं है। तो दे विल टॉक टू यू एंड गाइड यू थ्रू देयर स्पीचेस, देन यू जस्ट सबमिट दोस प्रोजेक्ट टू अस and we'll tell you that you will get good feedback, if nothing more. And probably, suppose your project has chances of success, which is 80%, 60%, 70%, that your chance will increase by 90%, 100%, don't know, after that evaluation. So that is next. So fund availability, I told you for all this muscle, land, site development, plant and machinery, every only except working capital, we almost fund every aspect. Otherwise, बैंक के पास जो बहुत सारे होंगे, plant and machinery में fund करूँगा, मैं land fund नहीं करता, लेकिन land की जरूरत है, तो we are very generous in that. Next. And this is the two-stage evaluation criteria we follow, two-tier evaluation. First, initial screening committee, and then we take project evaluation committee and higher level, and then finally the project is selected from us to fund. I can tell you for surety, the project which we do not take for funding, they definitely lack something. And that something even saves that company or that entrepreneur to get bankrupt later on. Understand my point? I'm trying to say. कुछ कमी है आपके प्रोजेक्ट में, यदि आप उसको दूर नहीं करते तो आपके लिए आगे प्रॉब्लम होने वाली है। आप मत करें, या आप इस इश्यूज को आप रिजॉल्व कर लें। आपके कॉम्पिटिटर इज डूइंग समथिंग better, you just study them, whether are you able to compete to that or not. All sorts of सलाह हम लोग उनको फ्री में देते हैं, that also help them. Next, TDP at a glance. ये सब तो अब चूंकि मैं फाइनेंशियल अकाउंट्स का हूँ, तो मुझे सबसे पहले फाइनेंशियल फिगर्स ही याद रहती हैं। हमने तकरीबन 300-350 प्रोजेक्ट्स को फंड किया है अभी तक। सरकार से जो हमें पैसे मिले हैं वो मात्र तकरीबन 875 और 900 करोड़ के आसपास है। पिछले 25 साल में हमने उस प्रोजेक्ट को फंड करके उससे जो हमें पैसे रिटर्न हुए 5% इंटरेस्ट के साथ, वी हैव मेड ए कॉर्पस अराउंड 2000 करोड़। आज के तारीख में करीब 2500 करोड़ का हमारी फंडिंग है। आप सोचो गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक ऐसा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जो सरकार इसमें पैसे देती है, बाकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को देख लो, सरकार पैसे देती है, उसका हिसाब पूछो, और हमारे यहाँ देखो। तो मैं कहता हूँ जितना पैसा आपने दिया मैं उसका डबल बना करके भी आपके कॉर्पस में है, और प्रोजेक्ट को हमने फंड किया हुआ है। हमारे यहाँ फेलियर्स भी है, आई टेल यू। despite high risk, our failure rate is very, very low, around 12%. By project, by volume, number of projects, and by money also. It is only 12%, much better than that NPAs of banks, where all those धुरंधर लोग वहाँ बैठे होते हैं जो evaluate करते हैं, और हम लोग तो novice साइंस वाले हैं, कम जानते हैं, स्टिल हमारा रेट इतना अच्छा है और हमने बहुत लोगों को सपोर्ट किया है. मनीष नेक्स्ट. सो दिस अक्रॉस, यही से हमारे इस आइडियाज का शुरुआत हुआ कि भाई जब हम अक्रॉस इंडिया देखते हैं तो बिहार में हमारा प्रेजेंस बहुत नगण्य है. हमने डायरेक्टली कोई फंड नहीं किया. यूके की एक DFID बोर्ड के संस्थान थे, इसके थ्रू इन्वेंट प्रोग्राम किया था. उसमें बिहार के 3-4 कंपनियों को हम लोगों ने फंड दिया. सत्तू, एक डी-मार्ट 3-4 जगह काम करता है. ऐसे कुछ उदाहरण से जो आगे आएंगे. हम लोगों ने जो 2000 करोड़ का वो हमारा कमिटमेंट था. तो नॉर्मली हम क्या करते हैं, मैक्सिमम 50% तक फंड करते हैं. तो उसमें आपकी इन्वॉल्वमेंट जो कंपनी की उनको भी आपको लाना पड़ता है. तो हमने करीब 10,000 करोड़ के आसपास, अराउंड 9,000 बढ़ गया है. इसकी टोटल वैल्यूएशन वाला प्रोजेक्ट हुआ है. बट इससे भी बड़ी बात मैं बोलता हूँ कि यदि हमने किसी प्रोजेक्ट को फंड किया है 5 करोड़ या 10 करोड़ और आज वो कंपनी 1000 करोड़ का है और उसमें करीब 5,000 लोगों को नौकरी दी हुई है, दैट इज द सोशल वैल्यू, दैट इज द मनी वैल्यू वी हैव जनरेटेड. डोंट गो बाय दैट लिस्ट. Today you are, India is saved to that extent from COVID vaccination. It was only because of our government support. Otherwise it was not possible for us to develop this vaccine in a single day. That was our social contributions. Next. So this is across sectors. Maximum our funding is health and medical, followed by engineering. So now IITs, आप लोग हैं यहाँ पे, आप मेडिकल, हेल्थ, इंजीनियरिंग सब. अब ऐसा हो गया ना कि लोग कहने लगे कि भाई IIT में आप मेडिसिन की पढ़ाई करो और एम्स में आप टेक्नोलॉजी की पढ़ाई करो. तो जब ब्लड होता है अब IT इनेबल्ड टूल बहुत चीजों को, अब वो स्पेशलाइजेशन अब लग रहा है कि कोई ऐसा समय आएगा कि वो सब ब्लड हो जाए. तो ऐसे भी पूरे सेक्टर्स के क्रॉस हम लोग फंड किए. सो एनी सेक्टर, सो वी आर सेक्टर एग्नोस्टिक, आई ऑलवेज कॉल इट. सो एनी सेक्टर प्रोजेक्ट जिसकी इंडिजिनस कैपेबिलिटी है, वो टेक्नोलॉजी इंडिजिनस ने डेवलप किया हुआ है, तो हम उसको फंड करते हैं. या आपके पास कोई अडॉप्ट करने के बाद की टेक्नोलॉजी लेके आए, आप अडॉप्ट करिए कंडीशन में, स्टिल भी सपोर्ट. उस टेक्नोलॉजी का वाइडर एप्लीकेशन होना चाहिए. आपने इंडिजिनेशन किया, उससे तो अच्छी कोई बात ही नहीं हो सकती. नेक्स्ट, सक्सेस स्टोरीज. यू कैन सी सो मेनी, आई हैव ऑलरेडी स्पोकन. So just name of any pharma sectors, almost all big companies were supported at their initial stages. So maybe day after tomorrow Krishna Allah is coming. Well, I requested him that he should be here, but you don't talk medical and vaccination. Why I told him? Because I said in Bihar we are agro-based society, still agrarian, and he is very good at agro business. In fact, he is master of it. Or he has illa food or something is in Bangalore. He is exporting all his products and outside country. I said, why don't you go and talk about all these things to them? Many people will come and take. So he agreed. He is coming. He will talk to you that agro-based industry, how it can be, and he is very much interested in investing in Bihar, by the way. Provided he gets all the support. हम now सागवाज भाई ने कहा है, उसने कि वो हम लोग साइन करें और कुछ हमारे सहयोग से कुछ इन्वेस्टमेंट बिहार में हो जाए. हम तो एक कैटलिस्ट का काम करेंगे इन लोगों को ले जा करके, और बिहार यदि इस तरीके जैसा वो कह रहे थे है तो बहुत सारी चीजें हो सकती हैं. नेक्स्ट. So these are all companies' names is there, which you just name it. We have funded them, so no need of saying again. Next. Now to talk about few glimpses. By the way, this entire PPT was made by Manish. I have not seen this PPT. The first time he is presenting here, so I am saying what he has recorded and that I am saying it. After I complete this PPT, I will call him to explain you those nitty-gritty of the project submission, and Smita will come and say how they are evaluating the project, so that they will give you inside view of this process. I am just touching about that from just scratching the surface. They will go inside, deep inside. When they will speak, so what kind of things they look for from the project. So they have done all those work. I am just taking their work only. So Nano Clean, these are few startups I have listed. We have given call recently. So by the way, not only through here, we give sector-wise calls also, where we invite project. Like in COVID, we invited that all COVID-related projects. We got around 200 something more projects. We just gave a call for a startup. We received around 25 projects, a startup project. Some of them was not through, but some of good project has come out. And I have personally visited 2 or 3 of this startup, and they're really good. And one example I can give you, that project is by Dr. Smita, because we always call this project consultant ka project director, uska project hai. Don't take credit. So this project, the first project I visited in Visakhapatnam, this guy is also from IIT and IIM. 3-4 लोगों ने मिलकर बनाया है. ऑरेंज कोई बोल के कंपनी है. What they are going to do is मेट्रोलॉजिकल इंजीनियरिंग है, तो कुछ उसने सोचा, and they are going to produce all those instruments that required for surgery, चाहे कैंची हो या जो भी चाकू हो या जो भी इसमें यूज होते हैं, so सारे अभी इंपोर्ट होते हैं और मैक्सिमम मार्केट कवरेज उसकी है. जॉनसन एंड जॉनसन है, स्मिथ कंपनी बोल के उसकी थ्रूआउट वर्ल्ड में. These gentlemen, they came out with idea. They have set up a project in Visakhapatnam. They are going to produce it in India. So this is complete indigenization of the project. The project is in pipeline. We are going to get the agreement very soon. So that is going to be a game changer. If that comes, and obviously under I just gave one advice to them that look, you are entering into such a risky venture. I said your product will be good, but see of the doctor and the patient. तो डॉक्टर जो जॉनसन एंड जॉनसन के कैंची से ऑपरेशन करते हैं तो हमारे लेटेस्ट पर 10 बार जरूर सोचेगा. So you have to have the quality. So you have to be even better than what they are producing. They are giving. So all their imported machines, they have imported from Taiwan. They have already installed it, and I hope they will succeed. Botlab Dynamics again. I always. This is the first project I have signed. And Tanmay, now I can say Tanmay. They have to give a clap to that boy. I tell you one reason. When this story was narrated to me by Sarita, there are 3 boys. One is Tanmay from MP, one is from Bihar, Jamui, Anuj, and Sarita. They are all founders and co-founders. She said, and really, basically, at that time my eyes was moist. Probably, you must appreciate. इस बच्चे का फादर का डेथ हो गया. केवल डेथ पे जाता है, वहाँ क्रिया कर्म करके वापस दिल्ली आता है अपने प्रोजेक्ट को. 1.5 साल तक अपनी माँ से नहीं मिलता है. इस प्रोजेक्ट में दिन रात लगा रहता है. और इस प्रोजेक्ट है कि 29 तारीख को हमको ये 1000 ड्रोन फ्लाई करनी है एयर में और ऑर्बिटिंग रिट्रीट परेड में, क्योंकि ये चैलेंज था. और इसकी पूरी टीम लगी होती थी. 30-32 बच्चों की पूरी टीम है, जिसको हमने बाद में टीडीवी में फैसिलिटेट किया. सारे इसके टीम लगे होते हैं इस पूरे प्रोजेक्ट में. एंड फाइनली और भी क्या चैलेंजेस आएंगे उस पर बात करना अभी मुनासिब नहीं है, लेकिन द डे हिस्ट्री वाज क्रिएटेड एंड नन अदर देन ऑनरेबल प्राइम मिनिस्टर appreciated and told Defense Secretary Adbhut. And some of the forum also he has mentioned about this project. This 1000 drone, we become the 4th nation in the world to fly 1000 drones. In fact, we will give his stories when they will be interactive. The entire thing was manufactured by them in India and IIT Delhi. In fact, the mold एक सेलमपुर के सरदार जी ने बनाया इंडिया में, और कोविड पीरियड में जब चिप्स नहीं मिल रही थी, how these guys are fought for. That's why I say कि entrepreneur के लिए आपको madness की जरूरत होती है. That's so Dot Lab is there. Manjira Digital System, again one of the project of its kind which we have funded. The project is, we have already 1999 war में, कारगिल war में हमको अमेरिका ने GPS data देने से मना कर दिया. At that time, government thought we don't have our own system. So ISRO ने वो 7 constellation हमारा ऊपर लॉन्च किया. सैटेलाइट हमारा ऑर्बिट में है, सब कुछ है, लेकिन जो उसके जो रिसीवर है, चिप्स है, वो अभी हम नहीं बना पाए. ये फर्स्ट प्रोजेक्ट है जो हमने फंड किया है, वो पूरी उसकी डिजाइनिंग से एवरीथिंग, दिस रिसीवर विल बी नाविक इट्स कॉल्ड. और ये प्रोजेक्ट मनीष का है. मनीष इसके टीम में, ही वाज प्रोजेक्ट डायरेक्टर. That was funded, and we just have recently, that was the second agreement which I signed. I am sure this is also going to create history, and if this is successful, this will, because the promoter is again from, I think IIT Hyderabad, or IIT Hyderabad? IIT Hyderabad. That professor is from IIT Hyderabad. And if it is successful, which I hope so, then all of our phones, etc., the steps will be our own, and it will be huge impact in the defense. You see, हम लोग GPS के उस पे पूरे आत्मनिर्भर हो गए. हमारा डेटा हमें किसी पे निर्भर नहीं होना पड़ेगा, और हम अपना डेटा अपना उसको सिक्योर करके रख सकते हैं. So see the kind of impact this project will create. It's not a startup project. I am Kunu Lab, again the project handled by Manish. स्वजल वाटर, अभी मंत्री जी कह रहे थे हर एक घर नल जल योजना हमारे गांव में भी लगा है. अब मैं उसमें उतनी डिटेल में नहीं जाऊंगा, बिकॉज ये पॉलिटिकल इशू नहीं है, बट वी आर ऑल अवेयर. बहुत अच्छी चीजें हुई हैं, लेकिन केवल एक वो टैंक खड़ा कर देने से और पाइप देने से जो जल चला जाता, तो हम बहुत पहले कर चुके होते हैं. और मंत्री साहब को मैं क्या कहूँ इस पर, लेकिन हाँ अच्छा प्रयास है इसके. ये जो प्रोजेक्ट है हमारा, ये प्रोजेक्ट अपने आप में ही यूनिक. दिस इज द थर्ड प्रोजेक्ट व्हिच आई हैव साइंड, एंड आई एम वेरी फॉर्चुनेट आई एम गेटिंग दिस काइंड ऑफ यूनिक प्रोजेक्ट. ये आपको IoT बेस्ड वाटर प्यूरिफिकेशन सिस्टम रिमोट एरियाज में आप लगाएं. आपके उसमें कहीं भी कोई भी प्रॉब्लम होती है, देन इमीडिएटली वो उसके सर्वर से इंटरप्ट करेगा. द पीपल विल कम एंड रिप्लेस इट बिफोर इट्स गोइंग कॉमन ऑफ. As a community, water, this project is again by madam sitting here, Dr. Smita. So मैंने कहा भाई आप लोगों का प्रोजेक्ट है, आप चलो. So I took both of them down. I will share with them experience how these projects are there. So they're all unique projects, and this happens. This will change the entire gamut of the how drinking water. वो आपके गांव में या पंचायत में लग गया. Community can take water from there in मतलब source water from the same place. Purified water, आप उसकी पूरी पैरामीटर्स के पैनल पे देख सकते हैं. pH क्या है, वो सारे वैल्यूज इज अवेलेबल. और कुछ भी प्रॉब्लम होगा इमीडिएटली इनिशियली वो ट्रिगर करेगा, वाटर के आपका सिस्टम ठीक करके चला जाएगा. सो देयर बिजनेस मॉडल इज आल्सो यूनिक. So these are all few projects I have listed here. I think now I am exhausted. I will request Manish to finish the balance of the presentation and share their experience, how things. The project you should consider, both of you and Smita, what kind of input they look forward when they go through all those projects and evaluate these projects. Okay?
Thank you, sir. You have already very simply explained explain about technology development board and the activities we are doing and the projects we are working upon. This is technology development board, as I just stated. Basically, the mandate is to fund the commercialization of technologies. Technologies which are homegrown, which are built in-house, and all which can be adapted for the Indian commercial use. So those sort of technologies which are at the tier 8 or 9 level, tier 8 or 9 tier means that the prototype is ready, certification is there, and product is ready to be launched in the market. So at that stage, the gestation period is very long and very risky phase of any project development. So at that phase, TDB comes into picture, take the risk along with the entrepreneur, help him and hold him and allow him to make an impact in the market and become a commercial entrepreneur. So that is what our mandate is, and that is where we work upon. And basically, the project which we invite to TDB is via online mode. You can go to our website, tdb.gov.in. There is a link online proposal submission. So you can submit the proposal by registering with that link, and that link is operational throughout the year. And by clicking on that link, you have to register yourself and fill some basic information on technical aspect of the project and the financial aspect of the project, and submit the proposal. And once it is submitted to us, then any scientist who are working in TDB will be assigned that particular project, and he will study that particular project, and he will reach out to the entrepreneur. And then the process of evaluation will start. The evaluation is done in 2 phases. First, there will be initial scaling, and if the initial scaling, we see the financial merit of a project and the technical merit. If the project meets our mandate and fulfill the financial and technical criteria, then the initial scaling committee recommends the project for the next stage of evaluation. And the next stage of evaluation, this is basically a more detailed due diligence. It is done on site at the company's premises. And they are a team of technical and financial experts visit the company's operations center and review the project progress. And if the second stage process is also recommended by the committee, then it goes for approval to the board. And then the project is funded by TDB. Funding is reviewed by TDB in tranches. Basically, it's a matching tranche. First, the promoter has to bring contribution from their side, and then the TDB gives the funding from their side. And for each release of the tranches, there is a project monitoring. So, project monitoring team visits the company and make a suggestion to the promoter, and accordingly the project moves forward. So, this is how the evaluation and project monitoring done by the TDB. And after the completion of a project, which is usually a rate of commercialization when the company has tested the remaining from the market, then there is a 1 year moratorium period. And after the 1 year moratorium period, the payment is start, which is I'm just spilling up briefly about the process. This is my last slide, and just explaining that how the process goes in the TDB and how we monitor the project. And after the monitoring of the project, there is a review period starts. And if project suffer any setback in the market or needs some further assistance, there is also a possibility they can approach us, and we do a committee of experts for the re-evaluation of the project and direct the project in a different way. So all those possibilities are there while execution of a project. So this actually our website is basically this, and funding guidelines. Can we click this website, tdb.gov.in? Exactly, they have to hit it is browse. Actually, so when the project is submitted to us, basically, first thing is that technology has to be innovative, because we fund the innovation. So innovation has to be clearly brought out in the project. innovation is the primary criteria of selecting a project. And second thing, it has to be backed by the IPs. Our project must have some patents, Indian patents, foreign patents. So all those IPs must be secure. And project architecture should be clearly explained and brought out in the project proposal. But what most of the entrepreneurs miss is that most of the startup are not good in the financial side. They on the financial aspect they do not do much work. Though they are technically very good, but on the financials they do not put much effort. So financial is also very important. We see how the product will fare in the market, what sort of projections are there, and what are the financial indicators. So all those aspects should be well covered and in sync with the technical aspect. So when submitting a proposal to TDB, we advise that they should also take some financial expert help. They can take the help of some chartered accountant who can brought out their budget very clearly in the financial parameters. So please take care of the fact that project should be innovative content should be highlighted very clearly. Project architecture should be mentioned very clearly. And the financial data has to be recorded in sync with the technical parameters. So these are the basic things which a promoter may take care while submitting an application to TDB. And this is basically a link on proposal submission. First is basically a call for proposal for semiconductor. Generally TDB comes with a call for proposal for semiconductor or in different domains. It is time to time. So we invite a proposal in that way. And there is a link below online proposal submission. So by clicking on that link, you have to register your details in that website, and then you can submit a proposal to TDB. So this link is open throughout the year, and you can submit a proposal to us. If you can click on that link, online proposal submission, online, yes, this one. So this is the registration page. You have to register with your email ID, password, and once you are registered, then you will get a particular link, and then you can start submitting the application. So first, if you can go back to the website, you can go to the download section. Yes, and go in the format. Just browse the page below. Loan application. Form A. Just click on this. So just click on this download. Loan application form and download. Open this PDF. So just browse it down. Just scroll it down. So this is basically the format of the application which has to be filled on time. So basically you have to define the project title very clearly. TDB basically funds for the commercialization. So the project title has to come up like development, commercialization, or this and this. So project title has to be clearly thought out, and then some basic information regarding the company. A company has to be private limited, registered under the Companies Act. So all those information has to be taken care in the form A. So just scroll down this form. So basically, just be a little bit slow. These are the basic things which we ask in our proposal submission, like what is the financial statement over a period of 3 years, profit of the common balance summary. So what are the outstanding loans against the company? The loans if the company has taken from any other banker. Just scroll down. And this is the information about the project. Technical details, what is the proposal from the company, specification of the particular project, technology details, source of technology, it is in-house or source from some R&D institution, marketing details, demand supply, marketing strategy, market survey, financial details, and this is basically cost of the project. These are the different heads under which we can fund the project. Means of finance. Basically, means of finance, promoter has to justify the 50% contribution from their side. So, how much equity promoter is bringing and how much loan they have been taking. The list of raw materials which they will be sourcing, plant and machinery for this project. So, all this information is being asked in this application, and all things have to be clearly brought up for the consideration by the team. Even if the application form is not so complete, but technology is innovative, so we do the hand holding, we talk to the promoter and help in getting the required information. Yeah, so I'm handing over to Dr. Srikant, she can explain. Yeah.
Idea same is one thing is you can do it by manually and submit the project. Online, there always trigger will come to you, just fill up the data. Automatically, a project report will generate to our website. And one copy will go to here, one will come to the process. So need not to do a project, banana है, volume बना करके मैं post भेजनी है, कुछ नहीं करता. That's the only thing.
I just want to add up to this what as an IIT PATNA startups are coming to us. Not like normal industries coming to us. Once normal industries are coming, they have a site and they have everything whatever we are asking in the application form. But a startup from IIT is coming to us because I have handled 3 projects from IIT Delhi startup. So they may not have many information whatever asked in the application form, but their technology, IIT technology will be really good, but they may not have the financial criteria, but still, you may, if you are in the incubation center, I think for 3 years, IIT incubation companies can be in the incubation center. So within the 3 years, if you are applying, please go for the patent of that technology and make a patent transfer agreement between the company and IIT. Then only you can fill up the application form of technology development board. So please make sure about the technology transfer agreement because after 3 years, these incubation centers are going out from IIT. That's the only thing. There is a difference comes and the other, if you have a land site, those things doesn't matter for CDB applications. Irrespective of that, also we have funded 3 to 4 incubation centers from IIT. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
So, thank you all for your thoroughly inspiring perspectives on this highly relevant provision. I'm sure that the lecture will be helpful to many of us. Now I request our director, sir, to present the report to our guest. This is for lecture.
One more thing I just want to say कि ये लोग हम लोग पूरी टीम यहाँ है, both of them is here. So कल भी यदि किसी को भी IIT में आप लोग जो भी इंक्यूबेशन से कोई इश्यूज हो कोई जरूरत पड़े, so we can help them to give a demo also outside obviously this program will go on. So we will be here. किसी को चाहिए तो
Now I, yes. Thank you. So we are starting the next session. 5 minutes.
So, no. So, please be seated. We are starting this next session. So, now let us welcome our new distinguished speaker, Professor Arvind Chaubey. He is Director IIT Bhagalpur. And, sir. Professor Arvind Chaubey has taken over as the Director, Indian Institute of Information Technology, Bhagalpur on April 26, 2019. He was a Senior Professor at the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering at National Institute of Technology, Jamshedpur, India. On deputation from IIT Jamshedpur from April 26, 2019. He was formerly Chair Professor in the area of Electronics Communication Engineering, as well as Dean, Faculty and Welfare at National Institute of Technology, Jamshedpur, Academic Research and Education Institute in India. Further, he obtained his bachelor's in electrical engineering from Bihar University, India in 1984, master's in electrical engineering from Bharat University, India in 1987, and PhD in electronics and communication engineering from Bharat University in 2009. He has already guided 7 PhD students at IIT Jamshedpur and 25 master's students, and trained several postdoctoral and several other industry professionals and teachers through continuing education also. Further to that, he is presently Executive Council member of AICT in Delhi, as well as is Honorable Member Board of Governors at IIT Allahabad. So I request Professor Chaubey to deliver enlighten us with his visionary talk. Sir.
कौन सा वाला है? ये फॉरवर्ड है। It's my pleasure on behalf of IIT Patna that PNC invited me to here as a speaker. Thanks to Professor PNC, organizer, convener Thakurji, co-convener Jawad Singh, and the faculty members and staffs and the media persons of this institute. I joined IIT Bhagalpur 2019 as a founder director there. I started 2017 and IIT Guwahati was the mentor institute. Just discussed tonight that IIT Patna has been asked to as a mentor institute for the IIT Bhagalpur, but that then director is not agree, so it goes to the IIT Guwahati. So topic is skill development and entrepreneurship, better to explained by the Pathakji and his team. Here, in the education side, how we improve the teaching, that is the enhancement, so that the students can do the startup and like the technology side, that is the research or something. So he is my hero. राजा बनना है, लेकिन सामान नहीं है, कुछ नहीं है, तो आपने जुगाड़ किया, वो 2 इनका रखा सामान, वो जस्ट एक आनंद ले रहा है राजा का। तो हमको भी, हम लोग को भी ऐसा थिंकिंग रखना है, तभी आगे बढ़ेंगे। Next, to sing the other cow better to cater your goat. So, ख्वाब है कि अंबानी टाटा साहब बन गए, वो बन गए, लेकिन ये नहीं सोचते हैं कि चीनी बादाम बेचते हुए वहाँ पर गए हैं। 1908 में टाटा स्टील जब से तुम्हें लगी, तब से इतना एक्सपेंशन टाटा का हुआ, वो बिगनिंग वहाँ से था। तो हम ख्वाब बहुत पहले देखते हैं, लेकिन हमको शुरुआत करना चाहिए। अपना बकरी मीन्स जो भी अपना रिसोर्सेज है उसको यूज करके अपना स्टार्टअप मतलब भी करना है, करें। तो इस तरह का थिंकिंग दिमाग में रहे तो हम कुछ काम कर सकते हैं। इसको बाद में करेंगे। So India is thought to be the, as Modi ji told always, that 65% youth is that is the young workforce. So India ranking that is 46th in the Global Innovation Index 2021. Before last year it was the that is the 48. So 2 steps jump here. So among 130 nations, it is believed that India can become a global driver of the incubation because of the its potential talent pool and the culture of the innovation. Despite being the world youngest country, अभी तक that is the workforce, percentage of the workforce in this field, 45% in China, 55% USA, 74% Germany, and 96% in the South Korea. In India, that is very small. So it is all contribution. We talk a lot about the this skill and startup, but you are nowhere compared to the other countries. Research facilities, compared to research facility from the other countries, USA something. So research grant in India only 0.69%, 28% USA, and 4.3% that is the Israel, and 4.2% South Korea. So government even the more emphasis on the research in other countries, but in our country it is very dismal. So naturally, if the government think about research fund in the university or something, so this can be actually industry people coming in the institute in other countries to set up the their laboratories and research activity in the institute, and after that they selling, they commercialize that items. So in Western countries where like the venture capital companies have opened offices in the universities. So universities developed countries have become the magnets that attract also interesting to know something. So if we realize in those countries that new knowledge and new technologies are the important sources to bring about the changes. But the Indian institute need to be revamping both way, and in the technology parks like the business incubators and venture capital foundations which are existing from last more than 50 years. So universities, if you compare our country and the other countries, so universities in the advanced countries are involved in the research and funding for the technology, while on the other hand, most Indian universities are engaged more in teaching as they were an extension of their schools. So very less importance research towards the research area, and the maximum we are BTech, MTech, do the thesis, something like this way. After that, where the thesis will go on. हमने सीनेट में जस्ट अप्रूव कराया है, क्योंकि सभी फैकल्टी यहाँ पर जो भी होंगे PhD किए होंगे या PhD करा रहे होंगे, PhD में एक सर्टिफिकेट देते हैं, दिस वर्क इज द नोबेल वर्क, जिस वर्क इज द नोबेल वर्क, तो आप उसको पेटेंट करने कराते हो। तो हमने सीनेट से अप्रूव करा लिया कि जो भी PhD के लिए थीसिस मेरे पास आएगा वो पेटेंट अप्लाई करके ही थीसिस सबमिट होगा। तो हमने एक न्यू आपका एक क्या कहते हैं पॉलिसी तय किया है, और 2-4 जगह और भी हमने कम्युनिकेट किया है कि आप इसका लागू करें। आप पाठक साहब इसको देखिए कि PhD के लिए सबका नोबेल वर्क है, PhD जो भी करेगा नोबेल करेगा, तो पेटेंट क्यों नहीं होता है? तो पेटेंट तो कराना चाहिए उसको, क्योंकि पेटेंट हमारे यहाँ पॉलिसी जो है इसमें कहीं दिए होंगे। सो एक 10 मिनट। ठीक है। So the most important employability skills are positive attitude होना चाहिए, good business sense, willingness to learn, resilience, जो आप रिस्क लेने की कैपेसिटी आप उसे उभर सकते हैं, एबिलिटी टू वर्क अंडर प्रेशर, ऑप्टिमिज्म, एडेप्टेबिलिटी एंड द परसेवरेंस एंड मोटिवेशन। No usual purposes can be served by organizing skill development courses to graduates as a short-term models for the building employability and the entrepreneurship skills. And they are best served as a refresher courses for the subject knowledge and providing theoretical knowledge about the software skills which implies for, but not the actual skills. It is not all that difficult for the colleges and the universities to impart employability and the entrepreneurship skills to students. The day-to-day course work itself can be designed as to develop these skills and attributes. These are the many role models among Indian universities, especially deemed to be universities that have been doing this for the decades. The other universities may take them as role models and they adopt various teaching learning methods. Some of the measures that universities need to be taken by the Indians. So, interactive teaching, how to promote all students and implement the atmosphere of the research and a startup in the institute. So interactive teaching. So improve the curriculum, communication skills, something lectures and notes. Students are given the assignments, case presentation, that is the adult place and the mini projects like this way. Treating students as the mature individuals. Student presentation students should be divided into the groups, and each group should be interested to give a classroom presentation on the topic allotted to them. Role play exercises, then outbound training, resilience building exercises, internship in the industries, ICT enabled flexible teaching. All faculty members should use the blended learning by using the number of e-learning resources, providing e-learning facilities like open source learning platform. Self-directed learning, so problem-based learning. Mini project, that is a major project, each and every engineering institution, it is already going on. Continuous assessment, venture capital fund. So each institution should create a fund to provide the venture capital for the startups, so that students having the entrepreneurial capability are not discouraged for want of the capital. They should actively help by the faculty in the various stages of the startup, so that it can be effectively managed and its product is the market. All audits can come to if you have the policy pursue them, that the world understand. Actually, आपको एक दूसरा जो दिया हुआ है उसको आप लिख करते हैं. 2020 March, that is the Corona started, and in the announcement in the March, our Honorable Prime Minister announced all the IITs and IITs that do something with such an area of the Corona. So all the institutes started to that is something innovation like PP kit and mask, something getting something instruments, the speakers, something. So we started the work, that is the first step, go through the so many journals that time in the month of the March, April, in the China and the other countries where the corona is spread largely. So it is found that from the lungs you can detect the corona also. So present method, it is the virus swab, RT-PCR and antigen test to test. So beyond this, there is AI and ML based, that is the lungs basis of the patient. Next is you can predict this one. So in the appeal we are developed, and in the month of the June, July, the WHO guidelines has come. You can do the research in the area of the AI ML based X-ray to detection of the COVID. So we have already done this project. I approached to the Mananiya Ashwini Chaubey, he belongs to the Bhagalpur and MOS 8 that time. I have done this chapter work. He called me to Delhi and sent to RML hospital to validation of that software. So it takes around 1 month to take the validation of the RML and give the certificate that it is working nicely, and that time initially it is the 93% efficiency. Then after I applied to the ICMR for the approval, because it is something which is parallel to the RT-PCR, because gold standard is the RT-PCR. So Professor Bhargava told me that, I talked to Bhargava. So I am doing the research in the area of the something biological tag, which is the IIMM. So you cannot help anything. I cannot do your validation. So again, I informed to the ministry that this type of information coming from the ICMR. So again, ministry talked to the Professor Bhargava, and Professor Bhargava constituted a high-level committee in the chairmanship of the Guleria Saab and the other like the PGI Chandigarh directors, CSI directors, that's 2 persons. ICMR is for 5 persons. I make the protocols. So first meeting it is going on. First meeting possibly asked me that how many आपने inputs कितना लिया था, एक्सरे कितना लिया था, हमने कहा 8,000. Very got it. हमने कहा कि 8,000 नहीं मिला. Why not Indian patients? हमने गुलेर साहब को कहा कि गुलेर साहब ये बताइए कि इंडियन पेशेंट का डाटा आपके पास है. तो उन्होंने कहा कि है, हम आपको देंगे, नहीं देंगे. हम नहीं देंगे तो क्यों पूछते हैं आप हमसे? आप हमको ये बताइए कि डाटा कहाँ मिलेगा एक्सरे पेशेंट का. तो उन्होंने कहा कि आप किसी हॉस्पिटल से टाइप कर लीजिए. हमकी टाइप करने के लिए आप डाटा दे दीजिए, हम वहाँ से ले लेंगे. सो फर्स्ट यू मेक द प्रोटोकॉल्स. और प्रोटोकॉल्स उन्होंने इसके बीच में कहा था कि प्रोफेसर चौबे तो ऐसा सॉफ्टवेयर हम भी बनाए हैं, हम ऐसा बनाए हैं कि मेरे जैसे आपकी लाइन में लग जाइए. हमने गुलेर साहब कहा कि आपकी सब लाइन में लग जाइए, जिसका अच्छा होगा उसका पास होगा. तो फिर चुप हो गए. तो हमने उसके पहले पेटेंट अप्लाई कर चुका था इसको. तो फिर प्रोटोकॉल्स बना. प्रोटोकॉल्स जब हमने कहा कि प्रोटोकॉल्स बनाइए और हम ये नहीं कहते कि मेरा सॉफ्टवेयर पास कीजिए. जो भी इस जो आप प्रोटोकॉल बनाते हैं, जो भी उसको उतना पैरामीटर लाता है उसको आप सर्टिफिकेशन होगा. तो उन्होंने प्रोटोकॉल बनाया. प्रोटोकॉल पर एम्स पटना को ऑथराइज कर दिया कि एम्स पटना आपके सॉफ्टवेयर को वैलिडेट करेगा. वहाँ से लेटर आ गया एम्स पटना को. पीके सिंह जो एम्स के डायरेक्टर हैं उनको उन्होंने फोन किया कि आपका लेटर आया हुआ है तो कॉपी चाहिए. कोई कॉपी फॉरवर्ड किए. ICMR से भी आ चुका था. उसके बाद उन्होंने 1 महीना लगा दिया. पीके सिंह को उन्होंने फोन किया, डॉक्टर पीके सिंह को, कि क्या हुआ डॉक्टर साहब. तो बोले कि चौबे साहब एथिक्स कमेटी एक होती है, वो अप्रूव करेगा क्योंकि एक्सरे आपको देना है. तो फिर काम बढ़ेगा. 1 महीने के बाद उनको फिर फोन किया कि ठीक है आप मैं तेरा एथिकल कमेटी कर दिया है. हमने कब आए. तो नहीं 1 महीना और लगेगा. एक्सरे को इकट्ठा करना है. उसने बहुत प्रोटोकॉल उठाया कि 1000 एक्सरे होना चाहिए. सो उसमें एटलीस्ट लेडीज का एक्सरे होना चाहिए. उसके पीछे कारण था कि जो ब्रेस्ट के चलते जो लंग्स का जो एक्सरे का जो होता है उसका मैपिंग ठीक से नहीं हो पाता है. तो उस केसेस में भी इनका सॉफ्टवेयर पास होता है कि नहीं होता है. उसमें से 18 ईयर्स से जाने का एक्सरे होना चाहिए. सर्दी बुखार खांसी जो लक्षण हो वो हॉस्पिटल में गया हो और उसका उस पेशेंट का एक्सरे होना चाहिए. CT वैल्यू जो है 37 से कम होना चाहिए. सो मेनी पैरामीटर्स काफी इम्पोज किए थे उसमें. तो हम ठीक है. वो वहाँ से इन्फॉर्मेशन आया, देखे हमने एक्सरे इकट्ठा कर लिया, आप किसी प्रोफेसर भेजिए. यहीं से आपको IIT पटना से ही पास आउट है संदीप राज नेशनल प्रोफेसर. और यहाँ पे भी बायोमेडिकल में ही उसको PhD मिला है. वो हमारे यहाँ मेडिकल फैकल्टी में था, लेकिन लास्ट ईयर हमने सबको परमानेंट कर दिया. तो वो इसका ये काम कर रहा था. हमने उसको फिर एम्स पटना भेजा. वहाँ पर सॉफ्टवेयर की जांच हुई और जांच होने के बाद पेन ड्राइव में सबको हमने वो एक्सरे दिए. हमने उसको मेरे लैपटॉप में ही सॉफ्टवेयर ये था. हमने उसको चला के 1000 एक्सरे को रन करने में हमको 4 मिनट लगा एक्सेस करने में. उसमें एक्सरे कोरोना, नॉन कोरोना, निमोनिया, नॉर्मल सब बताता है. इवन आपके लंग्स कितने % डैमेज हो चुके हैं ये भी बताता है. तो उन्होंने कहा कि हमको 10 लाख दिन लगेगा इसको एनालिसिस करने में, आप जाइए. तो हम चले आए. फिर एम्स पटना रिपोर्ट तैयार की. रिपोर्ट तैयार करने के बाद हमको ICMR भेज दिया. फिर ICMR ने कहा कि हम तो उसको करेंगे नहीं कुछ, ये तो हाई लेवल कमेटी की है, हाई लेवल कमेटी करेगी इसको. फिर हाई लेवल कमेटी के पास गुलेर साहब को चला गया. गुलेर साहब गेस्ट आदमी, वो 10-15 दिन 1 महीना और लगा दिए. तो लगते और हर एक जो मेंबर्स हैं उसका कमेटी का रिपोर्ट आया. तो रिपोर्ट आने के बाद सभी ने उसको काफी रिकमेंड किया है. इवन गुलेर साहब का कमेंट्स इसमें हमने डाले हुए हैं. उन्होंने कहा कि इस सॉफ्टवेयर का प्रोमिसिंग सॉफ्टवेयर है और उसको उन्होंने कहा कि इसको हॉस्पिटल में लागू करना चाहिए. इसके बाद ICMR के अप्रूवल हो गया. ICMR ने अप्रूवल दे दिया, हमको मेल कर दिया कि ये सॉफ्टवेयर इज अप्रूव्ड। डायरेक्टर जनरल प्रोफेसर भागवत जो है उन्होंने अप्रूव कर दिया ICMR को, तो अप्रूव हो गया। और अप्रूव हो गया, हम लोग प्रोफेसर आदमी फाइनेंस कमर्शियल कुछ नॉलेज नहीं है। अब जब हम ICMR में भेजे थे उस प्रोफेसर को, संदीप राज को वहाँ पर, अब वो हमको फोन किया कि सर ये लोग पूछ रहे हैं कि किसी कंपनी से बात किए हो, तो सर क्या करना है, हमें क्या करना है, क्या बोल दो कि डायरेक्टर से बात कीजिए। तो हमसे कोई बात नहीं किया। अब हमको बाद में मीटिंग आई, उसी समय कहते थे कि नहीं बात नहीं की है, आप फाइनल कर दीजिए, तो उसी समय हो गया रहता है। लेकिन नहीं हुआ, मैंने पहली बार है जो आने से हुआ था उस समय की बात है। ये तो एम से गया तो फिर अप्रूवल हो गया था। तो अब जब न्यूज़पेपर काफी सारा है, आपको एबीपी न्यूज, आज तक न्यूज काफी सारे कवर किए, टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया सभी कवर किया है इसको। उसके बाद हमारे देन एमएसआईटी मिनिस्टर रमेश पोखरियाल जी, उनको मालूम हुआ, उन्होंने ट्वीट किया, उस ट्वीट को प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भी रीट्वीट किया। उसके बाद अभी जस्ट नवंबर 4 महीना पहले माननीय धर्मेंद्र प्रधान जी कन्वोकेशन फर्स्ट कन्वोकेशन एड्रेस किए, तो इसके लिए काफी इसको भी वो पेश की है इसका। अब मनसुख जी जो हमारे माननीय स्वास्थ्य मंत्री हैं, वहाँ से कॉल आया कि एक गाइडलाइंस बनाना है इसको कि कैसे इम्प्लीमेंट होगा। आर्टिफिशियल तो पहले से है, लेकिन नया काम आ गया है, तो नया काम लगाने में सभी जाते हैं कि क्योंकि अब आर्टिफिशियल तो है, अब आर्टिफिशियल में है कि कोरोना सर्दी बुखार खांसी है तो आप स्वैब निकालेंगे, तो अब जांच होगी तो उसमें बताना है कि कोरोना है कि नहीं है। इसमें 3-4 दिन जब कोरोना का हुआ है, आपको फीलिंग ऐसा हो रही है, तो आप घर में ही पैरासीटामोल सबके खाते हैं, और जब खाने के बाद अच्छा नहीं होता तो हॉस्पिटल जाते हैं। 4 दिन के बाद जब हॉस्पिटल गए, जो केस बुखार नहीं होता है तो हॉस्पिटल गए, जो डॉक्टर कहते हैं कि आरटीपीसीआर करेंगे, तो आरटीपीसीआर करने के बाद वो कहता है 3 दिन के बाद रिपोर्ट देंगे। तो 3 दिन के बाद रिपोर्ट आया, तब तक वो जब गए थे उस समय आपको कोरोना हो गया था, तो आपका लंग्स में वो चला गया। और 3 दिन के बाद रिपोर्ट आया तो मालूम कि नहीं आपका, तो वो बेचारा काफी सांस लेने में दिक्कत होने लगी, वो फिर जाकर भर्ती हो गया, फिर उसका एक्सरे ले रहे हैं। तो जब आदमी को 3 दिन 4 दिन के बाद घर में देख रहे हैं कि उसका तबीयत ठीक नहीं है या अच्छा नहीं हो रहा है, तो हॉस्पिटल जाने के साथ ही आप उसका एक्सरे ले लीजिए। एक्सरे डिजिटल एक्सरे के साथ ये सॉफ्टवेयर उसी में इनबिल्ट है। जैसे ही आप एक्सरे लेंगे उसी समय विद इन सेकेंड्स ये आपको मोबाइल में इंफॉर्मेशन चला जाएगा कि आपको कोरोना कितना % लंग्स अफेक्ट किया है कि नहीं किया है, अगर किया है तो कितना % किया है। इवन आपको इंसर्किल भी करता है, जो कोरोना का जो पोर्शन है उसको इंसर्किल भी करता है कि ये पार्टिकल्स है जो रिस्पॉन्सिबल है कोरोना के लिए। तो ये हम नहीं कर रहे हैं, तो पूरा जो इंडिया के टॉप मोस्ट डॉक्टर्स हैं सभी लोग रिकमेंड किए इसको, उसकी बात कर रहे हैं। तो इतना होने के बाद गुलिया साहब उनके साथ मनसुख जी बुलाया, उनके साथ मीटिंग हुई, बोले कि चो साहब क्या चाहते हैं कि आप गाइडेंस बना दीजिए। तो गाइडेंस कौन बनाएगा? हमने कहा गाइडेंस तो आप हेल्थ मिनिस्ट्री बनाएगी या आप ICMR कहिए, आप तो सर्विस सर्वा हैं, आप उनको बोलिए ICMR को। तो बोले ठीक है इसको हम देखते हैं। उसके बाद 16 को, आज 13 है, 16 को जो लव अग्रवाल हैं जॉइंट सेक्रेटरी, उनके साथ एक इसी है जो इसके विषय पर डिटेल गाइडेंस बनाने के लिए बात चल रही है। तो उसके विषय में कुछ इतना तो हमने समराइज कर दिया जो यहाँ तक पहुँचे, लेकिन तो इसके अलावा भी दो हमने टीवी का भी उसी से बना दिया था कि टीवी भी जो है एक ही साथ आज ICMR भेजे, बल्कि प्रोफेसर जस्ट यू हैव मेंशन दैट कि कोरोना का हमको जांच कीजिए। आप तो टीवी के नहीं लिखे हैं, अगर टीवी नहीं टीवी हटा दीजिए, कहीं कोरोना जांच कीजिए। तो उसको हमने क्या किया, बोले ठीक है आप हम इसमें टीवी का जो मेरा सब प्रोग्राम है उसको हमने हटा दिया और टीवी का ये कोरोना का सॉफ्टवेयर का प्रोग्राम रखा और वही उनको दे दिया। फिर टीवी का भी हमने डेवलप किया, तो क्योंकि हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी का जो ख्वाहिश है, जो उनकी विजन है कि 2025 तक टीवी का उन्मूलन करना है, उसके लिए हमने पहले ही हेल्थ सेक्टर में काम किया। टीवी का भी हमने बना दिया है और करीब 1 महीना पहले जो इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ ट्यूबरकुलोसिस आके दीवान साहब हैं डायरेक्टर, उनसे बातचीत हुई तो उनके साथ एमओ करने जा रहे हैं। वो हमको एक कहे कि जो साहब आपको हम एक्सरे देंगे, तो उनके साथ एमओ हो जाकर एक्सरे देंगे। तो हमने बाहर के एक्सरे लेके हमने उसको टेस्टिंग कर दी, लेकिन इंडिया में इंडियन पेशेंट का जो एक्सरे है उसको होना चाहिए, अदरवाइज वो उसको ये नहीं मानता नहीं देता है। और पाठक साहब वो कर्मचारी पाठक साहब हैं, सुंदर है, भगवान के पास जाते हैं, ऐसे प्रणाम कर देते हैं, भगवान जानता है क्या करना नहीं करना है, इसको वक्त दो।
कंपनी से आपकी बात की आपको बात नहीं कर सकते, आपको कंपनी को लाना पड़ेगा, आप कंपनी में जाइए, किसी कंपनी के साथ
हमने एक पैसा नहीं दिया, मेरा पेटेंट पे अप्रूव हो गया, पब्लिश भी हो गया, सब हो गया।
इकोसिस्टम को समझिए, हमको जरूरी है कि मैं अपना सॉफ्टवेयर और अपनी चीजें मैं खुद बनाऊँ। कहीं पे रिसर्च हो रखा है, उसको हम उससे लेते, जैसे अभी हम जो प्रोजेक्ट की बात की, हमारे CSIR लैब से वो टेक्नोलॉजी मिल लिया। ये जो मैं अभी स्काईसेट की बात कर रहा था, वो उसने वहाँ से लिया है, CSIR के लैब से लिया है, टेक्नोलॉजी उसमें ट्रांसफर करा रही है। उसके बाद उसकी जो भी आपके रॉयल्टी की अरेंजमेंट है, आप IIT भागलपुर can transfer this technology to any company. That's number one. Under royalty agreement, or you can form your own company with 2 or 3 partners if you so want. जैसे वो मैं बताया, इसकी जो है वो मंजिला, ये IIT से प्रोफेसर है, मेडिकल का अपनी कंपनी बनाएगी, प्रोडक्ट उनका खुद का उनको पता है, प्रोडक्ट जा दे रहे, ऐसा आपको करना होगा। दैट इज द वे आप तो हद तक पहुंच चुके हैं और उसको मार्केटिंग करना।
तो जैसे समाज कर देते हैं, जो हमने कहा उसमें ये सब लिखा हुआ है, टेकिंग द वर्क इनटू द लेसन ICMR प्रोफेसर चेयरमैनशिप में ऐसा बना। COVID-19 in Patna has this is the comments of the chairman Gudaria Saab. He has stated the validation study conducted in Patna. The technology developed by the people of Bhagalpur is really promising and has reasonable accessibility and accessibility.
बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है, सब बताइए आप। ये बताइए कि आपको इसको मार्केटिंग करने वाला स्टेज पे पहुंच गए हैं ना?
हाँ, उन लोग पार्टी आ रहे हैं हमारे पास, आ रहे हैं।
तो फिर आप क्यों रोक रहे हैं, क्या चाह रहे हैं?
अभी टेक्नोलॉजी जो पार्टी साहब कर रहे हैं ना, हम अपने पास रखे हुए हैं, अपने अभी हमने किसी को दिया नहीं है, इसलिए
उनका कहना है मार्केटिंग करना है तो इंडस्ट्री से मार्केटिंग।
आप सेल्फ नहीं, आप दो चीज हो सकता है, इधर आप पेटेंट को बेच दीजिए या आप अपने रख के अपने करिए। आप रॉयल्टी पे करिए। अरे रॉयल्टी को नाम भी रहेगा, नाम भी रहेगा, और जितना आपका वो यूज होगा उसको आपको पब्लिकेशन है, तो ये तो बहुत अच्छा है, रियली ग्रेट।
ये ICMR का रिकमेंडेशन है, ये जो मेल में आया है, ये दिस वन। फिर धर्मेंद्र प्रधान जी ने इसको अप्रिशिएट किया। ये प्रोटोकॉल था दैट ये दिस इज रिपोर्ट सेंसिटिविटी और सेंसिटिविटी विद द रेडियोलॉजिस्ट। एक्चुअली जो एक्सरे थे वो आर्टिफिशियल आपको कोई जानकारी नहीं है, हमने तो काफी स्टडी किया उसको। आप जब आर्टिफिशियल का सेंसिटिविटी और स्पेसिफिसिटी, ये दो टर्म्स हैं जो ICMR के साइट में या उसके जर्नल्स में मेंशन किया हुआ है। सेंसिटिविटी उसको बोलते हैं कि अगर 100 आदमी कोरोना से ग्रसित है, इतना मालूम है कि 100 आदमी है, आप उसको स्वाब निकालेंगे नाक से या गले से और उसका टेस्टिंग करेंगे, तो 65 से 70% ही सही बताएगा, मैंने पॉजिटिव को पॉजिटिव बताएगा। 35 से 30% जो लोग हैं वो आपको नेगेटिव रिजल्ट लेकिन है पॉजिटिव लेकर मार्केट में घूम रहे हैं, अपने नेबर में जा रहे हैं, अपने घर में बैठे हैं और दूसरे को फिर वो इन्फेक्टेड कर रहे हैं। उस केस में मेरा जो है आपको आर्टिफिशियल के कंप्यूटर में आपको 96.89 है। और रेडियोलॉजिस्ट जो एक्सरे हुआ, एक तो आदमी गया सेंटर पर, उसका एक्सरे हो गया जो आर्टिफिशियल पॉजिटिव आ गया, एक्सरे हो गया। लेकिन जब उसको रेडियोलॉजिस्ट देखा तो वो कितने को सही पाया, कितने गलत पाया। तो उसमें से जो 1000 एक्सरे में उसमें 10-15 एक्सरे ऐसे थे कि जो रेडियोलॉजिस्ट कहा कि नहीं ये आर्टिफिशियल तो बताया लेकिन ये कोरोना नहीं है, गलत रिपोर्ट है। तो उसके हिसाब से रेडियोलॉजिस्ट का जो एक्सरे के हिसाब से मेरा जो सेंसिटिविटी था वो 98.13 और आर्टिफिशियल का आपको 65 से 70% है। स्पेसिफिटी उसको बोलते हैं कि 100 आदमी नॉर्मल था, एकदम नॉर्मल है, उसको कोई लोग नहीं है। अब उसका आर्टिफिशियल करेंगे, तो जब उसका आर्टिफिशियल करेंगे तो उस 100 आदमी में कितने आदमी को सही बताता है कि नॉर्मल है या कोरोना का नॉर्मल है, क्योंकि कोरोना होता कि निगेटिव हो जाएगा। तो उसमें वो 99-100% सही है, नॉर्मल को सही बता देगा आर्टिफिशियल। लेकिन जिसके लिए वो बना उसमें आपको 35 से 40% गलत है। कौन मैं एक्सरे नहीं, हमको तो आपको सेंटर पर जाना है ना, हॉस्पिटल जहाँ पर एक्सरे होता है। एक्सरे तो वो तो कोई नहीं कर सकता, एक्सरे के लिए तो लाइसेंस समथिंग, एक्सरे मशीन, उसके डॉक्टर्स होने चाहिए। तो आपको तो हॉस्पिटल में जाना होगा। तो डाटा तो वो गया वहाँ पर, वो एक्सरे कराया, एक्सरे कराने को नॉर्मल था, नॉर्मल रिजल्ट लेके आ गया। आर्टिफिशियल का नॉर्मल रिजल्ट लेके आ गया। और मेरा भी अगर उसमें सॉफ्टवेयर में भी लगा हुआ है जो निमोनिया में बताएगा, नॉर्मल बताएगा, कोविड बताएगा, और भी काफी सारे हैं रिस्ट्रिक्शन टाइप के डायग्नोसिस हम कर रहे हैं। अभी ये तो 45 था, टीबी लेके 5 हो गए। और रिस्ट्रिक्शन टाइप के जो चेस्ट एक्सरे है उससे डॉक्टर से कहना है कि 80% जो डिजीज होते हैं वो एक्सरे से, चेस्ट एक्सरे से मालूम हो सकता है। 18% डिजीज में करीब 20 टाइप के डिजीज है, उसमें 60 टाइप के डिजीज का हमने डायग्नोसिस AI लगा के कर दिया है उसको। अब उसको फिर फ्यूचर जैसे से होता रहेगा उसको करते जाएंगे। तो ये आपको रिजल्ट था। ये एडवांटेज डिसएडवांटेज लिखा हुआ था सबका, आर्टिफिशियल का, एंटीजन का और मेरे सॉफ्टवेयर का, ये सब लिखा हुआ है। डिटेलिंग इस तरह का और काफ़ी सारे डिटेलिंग लिखे हुए हैं। और ये मैंने नहीं लिखा, ये लिखने के बाद गवर्नमेंट ने इसको ICMR ने अप्रूव किया तभी आया है। इसको एक जब ये बनाया तो फिर हमने अपने प्रोफेसर बुलाया, कहा कि देखो ऐसा है कि एक्सरे तो कोई कहीं से मिल गया, एक्सरे गया ले लिया वहां से, लेकिन डॉक्टर्स डायग्नोसिस नहीं कर पाए उसको। एक और आपको बर्निंग एग्जाम्पल बताएंगे। जब ICMR के पास पहली बार गए, जस्ट 5-10 मिनट है क्योंकि ये अपना ये काम किया हुआ है और आपका इंटरेस्ट है और स्टार्टअप पर रिसर्च पर है, तो ICMR में गए तो उन्होंने कहा कि हम AI/ML पर काम नहीं कर सकते हैं। ऐसे हम आपको क्या करते हैं कि 20 एक्सरे आपको दे देते हैं, आप अपने सॉफ्टवेयर से चेक कर लीजिए, ठीक है। तो हमको मेरे मेल में, डाटा के मेल में वहाँ से 20 एक्सरे ICMR से आ गया और हमने चेक कर लिया। चेक करके हम सोचे कि ये कैसा एक्सरे दिया है कोई मालूम नहीं, ये फंसा मत दे ICMR हमको। तो ऐसा करते हैं कि यहाँ पर जो हॉस्पिटल्स के जो डॉक्टर्स हैं, रेडियोलॉजिस्ट हैं, उनसे इसको वेरीफाई कराते हैं। तो हमने PMCH जो पटना है, अपोलो हॉस्पिटल्स, दिल्ली के जो हॉस्पिटल्स हैं जो मेरे जहाँ पहचान के हैं और जो MOS से वो एड्रेस मिला, हम करीब 8-10 डॉक्टर्स जो अपने क्षेत्र के काफी रिनाउंड थे उनको हमने उस एक्सरे को भेज दिया, सबको 20-20 एक्सरे सबको दे दिया, वही जो थे सबको दे दिया। और आपको ये ताजुब होगा कि अगर एक्सरे नंबर 1 तो एक डॉक्टर कहता है कि ये कोरोना है, एक दूसरा कहता है नहीं कोरोना नहीं है, एक आदमी कहता है कि निमोनिया है। जितने स्पेशलिस्ट हैं डॉक्टर एक्सरे को देख रहे हैं लेकिन सबका रिपोर्ट अलग अलग है। उस केस में अब 20 एक्सरे का रिपोर्ट में किसी का मुश्किल से 5-10 मिला होगा, लेकिन सबका व्यूज अलग अलग थे। तो आप समझिए कि अब डॉक्टर्स कितने जस्टिस कर पाते हैं एक्सरे को देख के। और उस केसेस में क्योंकि ये जो कई लेयर में है, वो लेयर जो छिपा हुआ है उसका भी ईमेल और AI से हमने काम किया था। इसमें हमने अभी जो सेल है एसटी आपको उसमें उनका ये आया, हमको प्रोजेक्ट के लिए एमडी लोग बात किए कि सर जो छरिया जो घर में छरिया लोहा बनता है वो जब स्टैक्स होकर बाहर निकलता है तो उसमें 40 फीट लेंथ का होता है वो, तो उसका लेंथ कटिंग में मशीन द्वारा वो 38 हो जाता है, कभी 39 और 37, 40 फीट का नहीं निकलता है। जब वो कस्टमर डीलर के पास जाता है तो कस्टमर आते हैं तो बोलते हैं नहीं हमको तो 40 फीट का चाहिए, रकम नहीं देंगे, वापस कर देता है, तुमको नुकसान होता है। हमको कहा कि क्या आप इसको ये इसका सोल्यूशन दे सकते हैं? वो कंप्यूटर विजन लगा के इसको काम कर सकते हैं। हमने कहा कि कंप्यूटर आप कैमरा लगाइए, कैमरा मंगाए, हमने यहाँ प्रोग्राम डेवलप किया, जगह वहाँ ले गए और एक साइड से कैमरा लगाए, वो जो जैसे कैमरा से फोटो खींचते हैं टेस्ट दिखाता है, अब सबके कैमरा दिखाता है, वहाँ भी सर्किल दिखाने लगा। एक साइड कितना सर्किल है, वो साइड कितना सर्किल है, हमने काउंट करके डिफरेंस करके बता दिया कितना शॉर्ट कमिंग है, इतना लेंथ कम है। तो वो करीब एक कंपनी है जो हम तो कर नहीं सकते थे, तो हमने कहा कि भाई दूसरी कंपनी जो है उसके आप उसके थ्रू हम उसका टेक्निकल जो हमने नो हाउ दिया उसका पैसा दे देंगे और चूंकि IIT है और IIT में काम करेगा। तो एक दूसरा आया, ये जो पावर ग्रिड के हाई ऑफिशियल्स हैं, वहाँ के पावर ग्रिड के जो एक्स CMD थे IS था, वो NIT जमशेदपुर से ही पास आउट हैं। तो उन्होंने कहा कि साहब ऐसा है कि ये जो 735 kV ट्रांसमिशन लाइन जो हेवी टावर्स हैं उसके वो देहात एरिया में जहाँ पर जंगल एरिया है उसके जो स्ट्रक्चर्स हैं स्टील के, वो चोर क्या करते हैं कि सबको काट देते हैं, केवल पतला पतला जो है वही रहता है, जितने क्रशर्स हैं सबको काट देते हैं। तो हमको वो फिर टावर गिर जाता है, हमको फिर इतना हेवी ट्रांसमिशन लाइन को बंद करना पड़ता है। इसका कुछ उपाय बताइए। नहीं उपाय हो जाएगा, आप हमको तुरंत बताइए, उपाय बताएंगे हमको। तो हमने कहा कि ठीक है, हमने कहा कि फैकल्टी को बोला कि ठीक है तुम ऐसा करो कि मूविंग कैमरा ले लो, एक सेंसर ले लो, वाइब्रेशन सेंसर ले लो और इसको IoT जो करके अब दिक्कत ये थी कि उनके कंट्रोल में इंफॉर्मेशन देना था कि चोर अब घूम रहा है उनके नजदीक में, और अब चोर नजदीक में घूम रहा है तो कैसे बचाएगा, वहाँ पर इंटरनेट तो है नहीं, आप CV लाएंगे तो कुछ फायदा नहीं है। तो हमने फिर IoT जो 10-20 किलोमीटर का जो IoT जो वाईफाई जो ट्रांसमिशन रिसीवर जो एक रहता है उसको हमने यूज किया और यूज करके उनको 3 सेट बनाए हैं और उसको इंस्टॉल किया गया है। तो उसको वो लोग देख के ओके कर दिए। तो उसमें अगर कोई भी आदमी नीचे घूम रहा है तो वो मालूम हो जाएगा कि वो आदमी है। हमने उसको एक गाय घूमेगी आदमी घूमेगा, दोनों मतलब हो जाएगा। फिर हमने ठीक किया कि यार जो पैटर्न है आदमी का एक गाय का पैटर्न, दोनों को प्रोग्राम हमने डाला कि अगर गाय हो तो उसको खबर नहीं करता है क्योंकि मूविंग वही है ना। तो फिर तो कंट्रोल से कहेंगे नहीं मूवमेंट हो रहा है, मूवमेंट किसका हो रहा है तो मालूम होना चाहिए। तो मूवमेंट का गाय का है तो वो काटेगा नहीं। तो इस तरह का हमने बना के वो भी आपको दिए हुए हैं। इस तरह का काफी सारे काम हम लोग कर रहे हैं और नया नया टॉपिक कुछ भी होता है। हमने 2006 करीब 6 साल पहले जब NIT जमशेदपुर में थे तो इसी तरह सोच रहे थे, तो बोले कि यार रेलवे में जब विंटर सीजन होता है तो वहां से चलते ट्रेनें नहीं चलती हैं और लाखों करोड़ रुपए का नुकसान है, ट्रेनें बंद हो गई, पब्लिक परेशान है, ये सोल्यूशन होना चाहिए। तो हमने सोल्यूशन डेवलप कर दिया, फैकल्टी को बच्चों को बुलाया, BTech MTech के बच्चों को ऐसा काम करो, उसको काम किया। एक बच्चा एक सेट लेके मोटरसाइकिल पर बैठा, चला गया 1 किलोमीटर तक। यहाँ लाल पीला हरा जो सिग्नल होते हैं, रेड है तो वहाँ भी लाल जलना चाहिए, ग्रीन है तो ग्रीन जलना चाहिए। मुगल सराय जो स्टेशन है उसका जो इंजीनियर सक्सेस करके उसका सिग्नल का जो हेड था उसको वो हमको तो 10 बजे रात में उससे बात करते थे और सिग्नल का समझते थे कि नॉलेज क्या होता है सिग्नल का। अपने घर में 2 ड्राइवर को बुलाया, जो गाड़ी चलाता है उसका थिंकिंग क्या होता है गाड़ी चलाते समय, क्या सोचता है, ब्रेक कब लगाता है या नहीं देखता है, ऐसे चला देता है। तो पूरा व्यू जाने तब टेक्नोलॉजी को हमने डेवलप किया। डेवलप करने के बाद एक मेरे रिलेटिव हैं राजीव नारायण चौबे, सिविल एविएशन के सेक्रेटरी थे 2 साल पहले, अभी वो यूपीएससी के मेंबर भी हैं। तो उसकी घर में शादी थी, तो मेरा अपना भतीजा वो, तो उससे बात की, बोले चाचा जी बहुत अच्छा है। तब से रात में उन्होंने उस समय 6-7 साल पहले लोहानी जी थे चेयरमैन से बात की कि ऐसा ऐसा है, तो उन्होंने कहा कि ठीक है कल उनको भेज दीजिए। सुबह गए, 10 मिनट का समय मिला था, चेयरमैन साहब से बात हुई, तो कहे कि 10 मिनट के डिस्कशन में 1 घंटा डिस्कशन चला गया। बोले कि सब ऐसा है कि हम तो एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के पार्ट हैं, RDSO लखनऊ जो है वो मेरा टेक्निकल पार्ट देता है, आप वहाँ चले जाइए, पूरा टीम आपको वहाँ जाएगी, वहाँ पर अपना प्रेजेंट कर दीजिए, हमको तो बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है। तो वहाँ चले गए। 1 महीने के बाद फिर जब हमको अपना समय निकला तो फिर गए लखनऊ, वहाँ से दिल्ली से टीम आई, पूरा वहाँ के जो चीफ इंजीनियर GM सभी लोग थे, काफी भरे हुए थे, और वहाँ पर मेरा डेमोन्स्ट्रेशन शुरू हुआ। होने के बाद सभी पसंद किए, बोले कि हाँ बहुत अच्छा है। तो ऐसा है कि इसको तो हमको रेगिस्तान है, इतना गर्मी वहाँ भी लगाना होगा, कश्मीर भी लगाना होगा, तो आपका जो सर्किट है उसका आप सेफ्टी रूल, ये सेफ्टी रूल लीजिए, हमको इतना मोटा सेफ्टी रूल दे दिए, इस सेफ्टी रूल के साथ इसका टेस्टिंग करा दीजिए, टेस्टिंग करके हमको दीजिए, हम लोग इसको जून में लगाएंगे। हम लोग प्रोफेसर आदमी कागज दिए, कागज लेके अपना टेबल जाओ में देखे रख दिए, अभी तक पड़ा हुआ है वो प्रोजेक्ट, अभी तक पड़ा हुआ है, और पार्टी से क्या करेंगे मालूम नहीं।
सर एक क्वेश्चन था, आपने मेंशन किया था जो जब डॉक्टर्स के पास आप जा रहे हैं तो डॉक्टर्स हैव डिफरिंग ओपिनियन ऑन द सेम स्टेज, तो ये लेबर डेटा सेट कैसे आपका रेटिंग का जिसके बेसिस पे कहीं ना कहीं तो आपने ट्रेनिंग डेटा सेट,
ट्रेनिंग डेटा, अब एक ही चीज को अब
तो ये लेबर कैसे किया?
अब एक्सरे जो एक्सरे साइट पर है, चाहे वो गिटहब से साइट पर हो या जो गवर्नमेंट से हमको जो दिया गया, वो लोग कहते हैं कि आर्टिफिशियल जो कोरोना हुआ है उसके एक्सरे है, उसी का एक्सरे है, वो साइट डाले हुए हैं। अब वो कहते हैं कि वो एक्सरे है, वो ये रख देंगे कि वो एक्सरे, सुनिए कोरोना का नहीं है, कोरोना ये एक्सरे फलाने लोग का है, हम उसी को मान लेंगे। एक कुंडली बनाने वाला कंप्यूटर जो पंडित है वो कहता है कि मंगल में शनि आएगा तो पिताजी का देहांत हो जाएगा, वो इंजीनियर क्या मालूम, ये तो बनाते सॉफ्टवेयर, वो तो जो पंडित होते वो इंजीनियर बना दिया। तो अब एक्सरे कहता है कि ये कोरोना वाला है, ये सिंबल्स, ये जो मार्क्स, ये समथिंग रहेगा तो ये आपको कोरोना का सिग्निफिकेंस होगा। तो जितने पैरामीटर्स हो सकता है कि मैं नहीं हो, दूसरे में हो, सीधे नंबर ऑफ जो ट्रेनिंग डाटा है हमने उसको 28,000 तक ले गए। जब हम कमेटी के सामने, गुलिया सर के सामने जब इसको रखे थे तो 9,000 डाटा का था मेरे पास ट्रेनिंग, और तब उन्होंने नहीं आप इसको इंक्रीज कीजिए, इंक्रीज के 28,000 डाटा को ले गए, तब इतना एक बस आई है। अगर पहले 93 था मेरे पास, पहले जो आर्ग्यूमेंट में कराया था उसका 93 था।
और एक और आपने शुरुआत में कहा था जो PhD थीसिस में आपने सीनेट में अप्रूव करवाया है पेटेंट करवाने का, तो टिपिकली पेटेंट एप्लीकेशन से ग्रांट में जो लाइफ साइकिल है वो लगभग 1.5 होने
उसके अंदर पता है हम लाइट करते हैं
उस दौरान PhD स्टूडेंट
आपको डेट इनके 50 के प्रेजेंट लेके कितना आपको मिलता है?
आप समझे नहीं, वो कह रहे हैं कि जब आपको PhD अवार्ड हो गया, that is for your novel work, then why not it will be treated or recognized as it is the patent?
आप आर्टिकल के पास प्रोजेक्ट देते हैं कितना आपको मिलता है? आप बैठे अप्लाई कर दिए, मिलेगा मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा।
Then the time will be reduced, but you can be applicant on basis of the novelty of the PhD. Okay?
बिना PhD कोई भी सर्टिफिकेट जो आपका सुपरवाइजर साइन करता है वो नहीं करेगा जब तक नॉलेज नहीं रहेगी, और आपके जो कॉलेज में ही छट जाएगा वो।
पेटेंट ग्रांट होने में तो
नहीं, उसे मतलब से क्या बनता है? आप तो अप्लाई करते हैं ना, आपको डाटा मेरे पास उसमें था 50,000 डाटा केवल मेरे पास है पूरा इंडिया का, एक साल में अप्लाई कर रहे हैं। हाँ, उसका हम डाटा भी लाए थे, वो पहले वाला में था।
अप्लाई करेगा तभी तो मिलेगा पेटेंट।
प्रयास तो करना चाहिए ना, एक पेटेंट कैसे लिखते हैं, एब्स्ट्रैक्ट बनाइए, उसका डिटेलिंग चाहिए, फिगर बनाइए, एक तो उसको आगे नहीं।
Professor Chodo sir, it was very interesting, really lot of information. जो आपने आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस या डीप लर्निंग का जो आपने प्रोसेस शुरू किया, how many parameters you should as a diagnostic to tell the issue? Because there are so many notes are coming on doing that. Structured data, unstructured data, तो उसमें how do you actually what was your weightage in AI or ML?
ऐसा है ये इसमें डॉक्टर साहब का भी होगा
नहीं, मेरा भी फिर वही है।
एक सेकंड, मैं प्रोग्रामर हूँ, आपको क्या इंटरप्रिटेशन है वो आप बता के देंगे।
इंटरप्रिटेशन नहीं, यार ये बताया नहीं, आप नहीं समझ रहे। हम यदि आटा चक्की लगाएंगे, इतना उसको एक बारीकी वाली चीज कितना पतला निकलेगा।
आप हमको बताएं
नहीं, that software he has developed giving the parameters.
आप मुझे बता तो सही पैरामीटर क्या, मैं सामने बना दूंगा। वैसे ही तो डॉक्टर ने बताया भाई एक्सरे इसमें ये सब पैरामीटर्स है, तो उसको कोविड है, ये पैरामीटर है।
नहीं, वही तो ये सब
पैरामीटर डिफाइन करना और डॉक्टर का
पार्ट साहब
जो हो सकता है
नहीं, सही है।
मैं तो बोल रहा हूँ
मैंने हॉस्पिटल से कांटेक्ट करके तब आपने
डाटा है आपके पास, मैं बोल रहा हूँ डाटा आपके पास है, मगर स्पेसिफिसिटी जो थोड़ी सेंसिटिविटी की बात है। आई थिंक कुछ प्रोग्राम में जो ऐसा एक सबरूटीन्स होगा जो एआई का, जो उसको आपको मार्किंग करता है, थ्रेशोल्ड वैल्यू डिटेक्ट करता है, दैट इज द थ्रेशोल्ड वैल्यू।
हाँ, वो थ्रेशोल्ड वैल्यू जो है, अब सुनिए, वो आप जानते हैं, हमने वो प्रोफेसर कहा कि सर हमारे यहाँ जो कंप्यूटर है वो 8 GB रैम का है, इसमें जब रन करते हैं तो 2 दिन लग जाता है। तो हम बोले ठीक है, ऐसा करो कि 10 और किसी है ना सबका रैम लगा के उसमें लगा दो, 264 करने लगे तो 1 घंटे में हुआ। अब थ्रेशोल्ड वैल्यू का जो आप जितना ही कम रेंज करेंगे और जैसे इंक्रीज करेंगे टाइम वो इंक्रीज कर जाएगा। तो अब ये जो सीडैक यहाँ पर है पटना में, उसके जो डायरेक्टर है आपको आदित्य सिन्हा, वो NIT को MSc में मेरे देश में था, वहाँ पर जूनियर है। तो यहाँ पर डायरेक्टर उसको हम बोले कि ऐसा है तुम्हारे यहाँ सुपर कंप्यूटर है, हमको उसी के लिए दो एसएस दे दो, हमको एसएस दे एसएस दे दिया। तो हमने उसको एक वो प्रोग्राम करके मुश्किल से 2 घंटे में वो जो थ्रेशोल्ड वैल्यू को चेंज करते थे और देखते थे कि ट्यूनिंग जो होती है, ट्यूनिंग कितना रिफाइन हो रहा है, आप क्या वैल्यू को फिक्स कर फाइंड करेंगे। तो वो ट्यूनिंग करके वो थ्रेशोल्ड वैल्यू वो हम यहाँ पर जो सुपर कंप्यूटर है उससे उसको एसएस करके तब किया उसको।
We are really thankful to him that he has highlighted so many issues, starting from COVID and then rail safety and so on. Right? So now I request Mr. Naveen Minister to just present a vote of thanks as we do.
Lalabe.
He is waiting outside, so you all are requested to take tea and come back after 10 minutes for our last talk, for our last session.
very interesting talk.
Very interesting talk. So after 10 minutes, we will again sit back, right?
रंजीत
ये काम क्या हुआ है
Rajiv Sardev, gently chairperson of DDP panel of DST. He joined as a professor in physics department of IIT Kanpur after his PhD in 1979. And he has almost more than 40 years of teaching and research experience in leading groups, institutions like Cornell University, University of Pennsylvania, and the International Center for Theoretical Physics, few institutions among them. While at these centers, he worked and interacted with several Nobel laureates, including Professor Salem, Ken Wilson, Steven Weinberg, and Richard Feynman. He has contributed to several branches of physics. He was a co-discoverer of radiation's zeros of their use in determining the anomalous magnetic moment of the W boson. So he is one of the original pioneers of the field of higher-dimensional cosmology. He has worked on the nonlinear dynamics of Josephson's junction arrays and has developed several algorithms for simulating them. More recently, he has made important contribution to the area of indigenous instrumentation. In particular, he and his group have developed several scanning probe microscopes, physical properties measurement and data acquisition systems, all of which have reached internationally and of competitive standards. Professor Sardev is now co-chairperson of DDP panel of DST. So please welcome him by clapping and his experience, teaching and research experience will encourage to us to move towards the better research and development programs here. Thank you.
Okay, well, this is going to be a very different talk from the ones that have been going before. I was most reluctant entrepreneur. I was, as described, completely theoretical. And if you had asked me at the time when I joined IIT Kanpur, or if somebody had predicted that I was going to be an entrepreneur 10 years after I joined, I wouldn't have believed it myself. But it happened slowly, and it was something which was driven ideologically. It wasn't because of any particular desire for money or anything that sort. Or it was just that after having interacted with all these Nobel laureates, and I was working with some of the best people when I was there in the US.
And when I came back, I just found that the way Indian science was organized was just completely, there's no other word for it, disastrous. It just had to change. And you had all these MNCs coming in, and they were selling all this equipment to us. And they had complete control. They spoke to us as though we were, some sort of, intellectually feeble people. They could dictate terms, they could sell things at whatever prices they wanted to. And so I finally decided that enough was enough. We would get down to start building many of these things. And at that time, a choice had to be made. Because the moment you start building things, then of course you need a certain amount of money to buy components and so on. It's not theoretical work which you're doing on pen and paper. So we said, well, how do all these companies get their money? And the answer is that they make products and then they sell them, they get the money, and then they use that money to make further products and so on. So we said, okay, that's what we try doing. And the only difficulty was the very first product that you make, because that's the one
where some money from outside, some injection of money from outside is needed. So it so happened that there was a friend of mine who was into running, he was selling instruments. And part of the motivation was that I saw that all the instruments that we were using in the labs around were all imported. So, and this person was actually selling, he was importing a large number of instruments and he was selling them. So I got talking to him and I said that, look, you give me the specifications of some instrument and we'll try building it. I mean, I had absolutely no clue how that would happen because I was a theoretical physicist. I'd never even walked into a lab up to that point, leave alone getting into engineering. But I said, all right, well, that's a minor problem. That we'll figure out. First, you just tell me, you just give me the assurance that we build it, you'll be able to sell it. And so he gave us something to build, which we succeeded with. And then that started generating a certain amount of money. And we got the whole enterprise moving at that point. Eventually, he sort of moved away. But this is, by that time, had gotten our bearings. So what I do is that I break the talk up into two parts. And I promise that I'll finish it in 40 minutes, okay? So the first part is just my experience of entrepreneurship and the whole transition from a purely academic to an academic entrepreneurial and value generating form of teaching and so on. I'm doing more teaching in the company, or at least as much teaching in the company as I was in IIT PATNA. And everything, as you will see, that we have built has never been built in this country. So obviously to build it, you have to train people, which means you have to teach them. And so the process of teaching and of education goes on. And then the second part, I'll try to at least tell you a little about the types of things that we are moving on to. And if there are people here who are interested in doing that, then we would be more than happy to work along with them. Right. But I will also explain how I would go about doing those particular things. Right. I'm not too much into giving dhyan and advice. Right. I mean, I'll just tell you more about what our experience was. Okay, so one of the things that I'll just tell you about was that this is one of the products that we built. It's called a scanning tunneling microscope. Right. It is atomic resolution. Which means that you can see atoms with it. It's a very high resolution. In fact, we walk over an atom in 25 steps right now. But we are thinking of increasing that resolution for various reasons. I mean, and making it 100 steps. So we can go down to 100 the size of the atom with this particular thing. And in part it's because we managed to, you see, the atoms at room temperature have a certain jitter. They're all shaking thermally. And therefore there's a blurring because of that. But we've now managed to cool the whole STM down, I mean our microscopes down, at the moment to liquid nitrogen temperature, but we'll take them down further. And when you take them down further, that thermal jitter stops. And so you can actually think of studying the whole wave function of that particular, of the atoms. And so for that reason, we probably increase the resolution to maybe 100 the size of the atom. But in 2009, we had managed to, for the first time, build the whole STM and bring it to a level where we started selling it. In 2012, and that started funding the rest of the development. 2012, we built the first vacuum STM. We put the whole thing into a vacuum. And in 2020, we finally managed, after quite a lot of struggle, we managed to bring it down to low temperatures. We have so far installed 56 of these, of which about 30 or so have gone into the IITs, but they've all gone all over. IG Card has one, which is part of, it's the Indira Gandhi's IG Card Center for Atomic Research. ISRO has one, PI Part has one, and so on. I mean, DE institutes, SSPL, etc. I mean, the DRDOs and so on. And we got a wake-up call when suddenly NTU Singapore got in touch with us. And they said that we believe you have a microscope, and we sent us the specifications. We sent the specifications, which they put up on the on a global. I mean, it was a global tender on the government of Singapore website, which we easily won, and we went and installed. But selling abroad, I mean, even though it can be done, right now we've stopped. I mean, for Air STMs, they have these foreign companies haven't been able to sell one in the country now. I mean, in fact, they were calling us up to come to an understanding, which we certainly didn't want to get into with them. But, so we can sell abroad, but then there are issues with it, which, I mean, there's a whole infrastructure that you'll have to build if you want to do that. But we will eventually probably do that. Right now, we want to focus on the country itself. So it's gone into all of these, and it's been incorporated into all sorts of courses and so on. Okay, now before I go further, I do want to acknowledge the people who've contributed. There is, of course, a team, the Quasar team in the company. And these are all some of the most brilliant students I had in IIT Kanpur. They all came and joined, and many of them got inspired and put in a tremendous amount of effort. But there were others. I mean, Professor Anjan Gupta, who was started out by being a student, but he's now a professor at IIT. And then there's Ajit and Kundan, both of whom are at IUAC, which is the Inter-University Accelerator Center. So this was genuinely a collaboration between, three centers: IIT Kanpur, the Inter-University Accelerator Center, and Quasar Technologies. All right, and then of course there's a whole bunch of these installations. You can do a Google search, and if you do a Google search for Quasar Tech, NanoRev STM, then immediately you'll get all these papers coming out, and these are papers which have referred to the instrument in the text itself. All right, so it's Now I'll just tell you, just before I go ahead, and this is one of the things that is very important while writing a project. People just start getting into the details of how the thing has to be done without telling you what it is. So let me first at least tell you what a scanning tunneling microscope is, because when we started building it, I didn't know what it was, and none of the people who have built it knew what it was. So I assume that none of you also knows what it is. So I'll first just tell you about it. Alright. So if you were to open out, like if you just go out and you look at any of these circuit boards, you will see something like this, and all the components on this are on the scale of centimeters. You take a small part of it, you magnify it, everything is on the scale of millimeters. This is an integrated circuit chip out there, which you can make, you can also open out. If you do that, everything inside is going to be on the scale of micrometers. And you have chips inside the chip, all right, which you can open out. And now you got this is on silicon. These things are, this is a strain of gold out there. You magnify it by a factor of 10. This is what it looks like. This is with our own microscope. Go one step further and you start seeing the atoms. Right? And this whole thing has happened, so this jump from microtechnologies to nanotechnologies, all right, or microscopes to nanoscopes, has taken place because, and it's been happening over the last 20 or 30 years, precisely because of the existence of instruments of this sort with which you can actually modify things. All right, you can do nanolithography, for instance. You can write, and you can create channels which are just 1 or 2 or 3 atoms wide. All right, and you can see exactly what you're doing. So because we have eyes that effectively go all the way down, it becomes possible to do this. So now the way it works is quite interesting. It's the way a blind person would try to recognize a friend. He or she would touch the friend. I suppose the friend is being mischievous and doesn't identify himself or herself. So he or she would just touch the friend's face and scan it. All right, that's where the word scanning comes from. And as he or she is scanning, you touch the forehead and then the eyebrows and then the eyes and so on. There'll be sensations at the tips of the fingers, and those sensations will pass from those tips would go through circuits in the arm to the brain, and in the brain there'll be an image processing program which will convert these sensations into an image. That's exactly what happens here. You have a tip here, alright, which is the probe, alright, which is like the finger, and then you've got this surface which you're trying to, which is like the face which you're trying to image, and then you connect a battery between these two. And when you do that, and you bring this probe very close, by very close, I mean you bring it to within 2 or 3 atomic distances. The gap is only 2 or 3 atoms. Alright, you need that level of control. But suppose you do that, you will then get a small current flowing through a process known as quantum tunneling. Alright, so you get this scanning quantum tunneling current microscope. So the sensations, this quantum tunneling current is like the sensations at the tips of the fingers. You have to take those sensations and carry them to a computer. On the computer you have this image processing program, and that reconstructs the whole image. Alright, so now this, of course, once you get all that information there, you can turn this around, you can view it in 3 dimensions and so on, depending on how powerful that image processing program is. And now it turns out the reason why I'm showing you this is that the base program that we've used is called Maya, alright, which is a perfect name for an image processing program. It creates Maya. It just creates this whole illusion. And it's called Maya because it's been written by an Indian. It was written by Prabhu, who was a PhD student in aeronautical engineering in IIT Madras, when he wrote this, and this is all open source. So we've used only open source stuff, it's everything's on Linux. We have fanatics, in fact, in the company. One of them had gotten a computer which had Windows on it, and he said, I don't want Windows. He said, the computers are not coming without Windows. So he buys it, and the first thing he does is to reformat the hard disk and get rid of Windows, and then he puts Linux there. Alright, so I mean, and he sort of shreds the thing so that there is no trace of Windows left. But anyway, so now the whole image processing program, the base is itself been all developed in India. Now this is what the thing looked like when we first developed it. I was a theoretical physicist, I never built any of this stuff. I certainly didn't have the confidence that we'd get the whole thing built. And so we built the electronics in parts, and then we tested it, and then connected up all of these parts. And then this is where the scanning was being done, the scan head was there. And then you had now there is one part that I'll just have to explain. The way you get this atomic resolution, the way you're able to see the atoms, is that this tunneling current is very, very sensitive to the to the distance that you have to tunnel. I mean, the sensitivity is captured in the fact that if you move the tip away by 1 atomic distance, just 1, okay, the current comes down by a factor of 10. So as you are scanning, if the last atom on the tip comes here and it has about 2, this distance is small, so the current goes up. Now here, these are the 3 atoms on the surface. So if you're scanning like that, you come here, this distance has become larger. So the atomic current comes down sharply. Alright, and that's how you get the atomic resolution. That's the good news. But the bad news is that suppose a car goes by and it creates vibrations in the floor, and the vibrations come and they come into your apparatus, and this thing now starts oscillating. And it oscillates with an amplitude, it just goes up and down by 1 atomic distance. Your current will be going up and down by a factor of 10. And instead of looking at what the surface looks like, you'll be just seeing the oscillation spectrum. So you cannot tolerate oscillations with an amplitude of even 1 atom. In fact, our estimate right now is that these oscillations are 1/50th the size of an atom right now. Alright, in what we built. But when we were first looking, so that's why we had to take this and we put the feet into sand, and with the hope that if the vibrations came, they'd have to go through the sand, and there'd be these fine particles of sand, and they'd rub with each other, and and they convert all the energy of the vibration through friction into heat and would dissipate them. Anyway, but looking at this, you have to be a true believer to think that you're going to get atoms out of this. But that's exactly, and we would start scanning at 10 at night and go on scanning till about 2 or 3 in the morning, because that's when all the activity had died down. But, that's why we do science, miracles happen. So we stepped out for dinner, and we got a phone call saying, I think you should come back. And when you get a phone call at 10 at night saying you should come back, it means something is blown up. So I said, what's happened? He said, well, I think I'm seeing atoms. I said, really? So we rushed back, and this is what the person showed us. This is becoming larger and larger, and then just a bit of image processing, we started seeing the atom. We said, wow, yeah, this thing has really worked, or this whole thing is now working. And so then we sort of scanned for another hour or 2, and about 10, it was about midnight, we finally said, well, this really has happened. So we phoned up Kundan, who was at IUAC, which is about 4 kilometers down. All this was happening in Delhi, not in Kanpur, for reasons that I'll have to explain later. But, so we told Kundan that, hey, we got the atoms, if you want to come, you can do so right now. I mean, you can come tomorrow. He says, the atoms might not be there tomorrow. Yeah, I'm coming right now. Just hang on to the atoms, I'll come and take a look. And he hopped onto his scooter and he comes. And then we scanned till about 1:45 in the morning. 1:45, we are right next to IIT Delhi. So the last student cafe was going to close down. We rushed. All we got was coffee. But even with that coffee, Kundan takes one sip when he gets up. And he says, oh, we Indians, we don't have no self-confidence. And I said, thank God it was only coffee. I had to drink something else. I don't know what kind of speech would have started. Anyway, so after this, what happened was that this then turned into a product of it. All this electronics went into this particular box. It had to be completely redesigned and went through a few iterations. This entire vibration isolation thing went here. And this all came, I'll just explain, and this scan head was here, and this had to be then shielded. This was the first model that we finally sold to NPL. And NPL, it was quite funny that, we sold it at that time for 5 lakhs. Okay. And he asked this guy, at the same time, NPL was making a foreign purchase for 6 crores. So, we asked this guy that I hope we'll get our money out without having to pay a bribe. He says, man, he has 6 crores to go after. He's not going, even our class has standards. They're not going to go after your 5 lakhs. So we did get our entire 5 lakhs out without having to pay a bribe. So, but when I say that we made it, what I mean is, this is not an assembly job, right? So this is not happening through what, as I'll explain later, finance capital. It's happening through intellectual capital. So we have designed and machined every mechanical component with our own hands, on lathes and so on. We have designed and soldered and resoldered the entire electronics. We've gone down to the chips. Those chips have had to be bought. We haven't gotten into. But everything else has been done by us. And we've taken it through 2 or 3 or 4 generations now. This was just the first version. We've gone much further than this. And then every line of the software we have written ourselves with these other things as base, with Maya as base and with Linux and so on. But all of the software has been written by us. Probably. And then we wrote, then the entire ergonomics, making it user-friendly and so on, was done through a master design thesis that was guided by Amit Ray, who was running a successful, he's from Shantiniketan and has that whole aesthetic sense and all that stuff. So we guided a student called Ameya something. And the mandate was that you have to make the changing of the tips of the samples very user-friendly and then making all the connections again. You see, if we went back to that other thing with that box, it would take half a day to change the samples and the tips. Now this one takes about 3 minutes.
And then finally, one of the other important innovations in all of this was that the entire documentation for all of this was in Hindi. And that was not necessarily for ideological reasons. It was because a large portion of the team that was actually building this and had the manual skills had never gone to college. So these people spoke only Hindi. And therefore, Hindi became de facto the language in which the entire thing was discussed and brought up. Now, it is also very important to realize that whole role of language, because even though I'm giving this lecture in English right now, I mean, I've given the lecture just yesterday, something similar at CUSD, which is this Central University of South Bihar in Gaya. And that was, of course, entirely in Hindi. But the point is that when Einstein developed his theory of relativity, he didn't speak a word of English. He developed the whole thing in German. When the French were doing the first phase of electromagnetic theory, Coulomb's law, Biot-Savart law, Ampere, 1 ampere of current and so on. All these guys were French. They wrote all their papers in French. All of electromagnetic theory developed in French. All of quantum mechanics developed in German. The whole theory of superfluidity developed in Russian between Landau and Kapitsa. So, I mean, the Germans are doing all their physics in German, the French in French, the Russians in Russian, the Chinese in Chinese, the Japanese in Japanese. But Indians think that there's a mystical connection between English and science. So that mystical connection, of course, we completely ignored and we sort of switched to Hindi in this case. Of course, if we'd been in Kerala, we would have been doing it in Malayalam. Now this is a zoom which is just worth looking at. This is where you see a large number of grains, but it also shows you the sheer power of the instrument. And you go on zooming until you have only one grain left, and yet you go on, continue with the zoom until you've resolved the atomic lattice. Right. Now this is quite a fascinating thing, because when you started, you see, I'll just tell you, this shows you the power of the zoom, right down to the atoms. Okay, which we now want to increase to parts of the atoms. Alright. But when you're starting out, alright, where you have the largest number of grains, alright, that is only 2.5 microns by 2.5 microns. Alright. That's 1/400th of a millimeter. All of you know what a millimeter is. So you break that up into 400 equal parts. You get the edge of a sharp knife. You cross that with another edge, you get a point. And everything you're seeing is inside that point. There are whole universes which are opening out. If you go to the last point of the zoom and you zoom into that, you're going to see another universe opening up. So this just reminds you of beholding the universe in a grain of sand. I mean, that is the kind of thing that's happening out here. Anyway, the next step was then to put this whole thing into a vacuum. And with the vacuum, there are other things. It reduces thermal drifts, the tunneling current becomes steadier, the quality of the images goes up even further. And there is, and all of these now, you see, what we managed to do was that since we were making this now, for the imported price of this was maybe about 25 lakhs, okay. And we brought it down to 10. So these people don't touch us in price. And we had pushed up our specs to a little beyond where they were. So they weren't, so that's how we were able to get the market from these guys. And now with the vacuum STM, we haven't been, installed too many of these. The vacuum is still low. So if we have to go beyond this, we will have to make, there are issues, when you're creating the vacuum, normally you would put a pump there, but the pump is going to create vibrations. And as we just pointed out, you can't tolerate vibrations of more than an atom's width. So you can't have the thing vibrating, so you have to do the pump without vibrations. And there is a process called sorption through which you can do it. And if you want to go to higher vacua, then you would have to build better pumps. Now, of course, we are not importing all these things. We are building every single one of them. We are designing them and so on. All right.
So it's not, the business model is certainly not based on importing these components and then getting the cost below whatever those people are doing and trying to do it through a larger market. That's a different model. This model is based entirely on building up the whole IP, on figuring out how to build all these components themselves. So, but the next thing then, which is now a bigger jump, is taking it down in temperature, all right, to at the moment to liquid nitrogen temperatures, which is 77 Kelvin. And liquid nitrogen, it turns out, is available, not everywhere in the country, but it's certainly available in all the urban areas and so on. And the price of liquid nitrogen is the same as the price of milk. And it has remained exactly the same. It's 55 rupees a liter. It becomes a little cheaper if you're living close to a steel plant. Because for a steel plant, you have to liquefy, you need very high temperatures, you need to go up to 4,000. The way they get high temperatures is that they use liquid oxygen. So what they do is they take air and they liquefy the air. And they take out the liquid oxygen part. And the liquid nitrogen is a waste product, which they're quite happy to sell. And depending on what the volumes are, I mean, I've gone to IPR, which is the Institute for Plasma Research in Gandhinagar. And there they were buying it for 8 rupees a liter. But anyway, we are buying it for 55, but that's still tolerable. And so you can take it down to 77 Kelvin. Now, I'll just show you a couple of things. I mean, there's a certain level of sophistication that's required. Let me just run for you a small video. This is, so what we have to, you see, in order to get to those temperatures, no, it's not running. Yeah, can you just get it running? So to get it to those temperatures, we have to take it into a cryostat, which we've all designed and built. So this thing continues. All the building and everything is, of course, the designing, the building, etc. is we're doing all of it. But we have to get into this cryostat, but as we are getting it in, the alignments, etc. have to be perfect. So we have to build a whole lift assembly to do that. And then the whole thing has to also be user friendly, which means that if you have to change the tip, you have to do all of that. And once you've taken it down, you've created a vacuum, you've lowered the temperatures, opening it is a bit of a hassle. So you have to figure out ways in which you're going to be able to rectify things. So all of this becomes slightly high-tech, but we managed to do it. I just want to demo the thing. And we've also installed the first one in ISRO. I mean, that's the first save we've made. And there are another 2 or 3 lined up. So this part we're getting a little more confident with. But we can't one second. What's happened there? How come we're not being able to run it? It's not running on that. Okay, we'll come back to this. I'll run it for you once they figure out. It's running there, but for some reason it's not protecting there. The वापस वो टॉप पर आ जाए लोग. So this form of entrepreneurship that we're talking about, there's a huge component of just pure R&D and development. I mean, these are, it is, yeah, can we, F5 करें?
Duplicate कर दीजिए.
this whole lift assembly, there are companies that are making some of these, I mean, they're all Indian companies, right? I mean, if the moment you have to import something, the expense goes up massively, and it's a major hassle. But there are, now this entire thing, you see the whole vibration isolation thing stage is all here. It had to all be redesigned, and now you can see that this is now completely smoothly being lowered into this thing. Alright, so that was, and did we run the other one? There is one more movie there. Yeah, this one. If it runs, hopefully we'll get a slightly better. Yeah, so this is the, we were able to now resolve atoms here. These are atoms of carbon, alright, that we were able to resolve, and this is at 150 K. Alright. So it's, I mean, room temperature is about 300, so minus 150 centigrade. But we've taken it down to 77. And if we want to take it down further, you can pump liquid nitrogen. But liquid nitrogen, unfortunately, becomes solid at 55 Kelvin. So the lowest you can get to is 55. And if you have to go lower than that, then you have to get into other aspects of cryogenics. You have to figure out how to liquefy. Either you do liquefy helium. Now all of these things really have not, I mean, these people did it. I mean, the Cameron-Jonas did it in 1911 or 1912. But we haven't done it. I mean, in India we haven't really, RR CAT has gotten up to a certain level with it. But they haven't quite been able to take it through. But this one, as you, I mean, can we run it just once more? I just want to show a couple of other things. The moment you get into low temperatures, again, the level of technology once again jumps up. I mean, you have to make all these feed-throughs. The whole thing has to work at low temperatures. When you go to low temperatures, these are really low temperatures. They're like, well, not really low, but they're like minus 200 degrees. They're not very close to absolute zero, but they're still. And so you have to, I mean, all this electronics, of course, we built, but this is all operating at room temperatures. But there is a certain amount of electronics that has to operate at lower temperatures, or at least is subject to lower temperatures. And that you can't afford, because a lot of these chips will work, I mean, they're rated only up to minus 40 degrees centigrade, and you go to minus 200, they'll all stop working if that happens. So there are issues in design, and building that level of manpower that can do this is part of the challenge. Anyway, can we return to the talk? Wait, I'm running out of time, so I promised that I'd do it in 40 minutes, I've got already. The next slide, please. Yeah, so now, this is fine. So then, of course, we were trying to, it wasn't just, I've just given that as an example of one of the things that we built. But what we were trying to do was to build a whole ecosystem for research where everything that we were using for research had been built by us. So we had to then build, if we have to, we need tools with which we can build samples, we can crystallize things, we can do all of that. So that was the other part, and then we had to build more characterization stuff. We had to actually write programs and so on for understanding the results, for doing the theory, etc. And then that would allow us now to say, work on new materials and so on. But it would now be a completely indigenous base. Everything that we were using was being built here. I mean, the total imported component of what we are doing is like 3 or 4%. Alright. I mean, it's a critical 3 or 4%. So, I mean, if those guys cut us off, then the whole thing will stop. Like right now, with COVID, what happened was that all these people for all these fabs stopped producing these chips. So many of these chips are no longer available right now. And that has caused a lot of problems. I mean, many of these Chinese companies have bought up these chips and they're selling, things that are available for $3. These people are quoted $357 and you wanted to write back to them saying, are you mad? A $3 thing for $357. And that too, they said you have to buy 100 of them minimum. Alright. So they're dictating, anyway, so we built this other thing, which was a gas chromatograph, alright. CVD, sorry. We built a gas chromatograph, but this one is a chemical vapor deposition system. With which, again, when I say that we built them, it means that we built everything. All the mechanical parts, all the electronics, the software and so on. Alright. But we're also now using this to build many of the materials on which we are doing the research. For instance, we've used this to grow graphene. Alright. And to do this, we had to start building optical microscopes. So we built a top illuminated optical microscope, which I haven't shown here, but with which we've taken some of these images. Alright. And then what happens is that when you grow graphene you normally have to grow it on copper. And when it's at elevated temperatures, when you cool it down, the copper shrinks, but the graphene doesn't shrink as much, so it folds up. And those folds are now, these are images that we've taken with the STM, with the scanning tunneling microscope, which is our own thing. But we can then zoom in and we can see all the different types of patterns, and we can go all the way down to the atoms. This one, for instance, shows that you see 6 carbon atoms out here, and this shows that this is single layer graphene. And if we can now perfect the ways of producing single layer graphene, then graphene itself becomes there are a number of companies now in the West which are selling graphene as a product itself. So this now becomes possible to do that. These are again other images. And then we built a system with which we can do a lot of physical properties, we can measure resistances, we can characterize devices and so on. And finally, as again a result of all of this and of the technology that's built up, there was a student whom I had at IIT Kanpur who was pretty good. And he went out, I couldn't stop him from going out for his PhD, but he says, I'll go out and I'll be back in 4 years. And sure enough, at the end of the 4 years, he had offers from Princeton and Berkeley and so on. He turned them all down and he did come back. And he came back and then he worked in the company for 4 years. And over those 4 years, we wrote one of the fastest codes for solving the Boltzmann equation, which is an equation that people have been grappling with for the last. In fact, 2022, it was put down in 1872. In 2022, it's now 150 years of the Boltzmann equation. But we managed to produce the fastest codes in the world for doing this particular thing, but which we haven't yet been able to commercialize, but we did use them to write papers in top journals from the company. Anyway, now let me make a couple of comments, alright? And just to explain what we are doing and how it relates to the rest of the thing, because this seems like a completely different world. This is a completely different type of company. Now, the point is that whenever you're talking to people, they say, but who invested? Paisa kisne lagaya? So the assumption is that the controlling factor is money. But capital really, exists in multiple forms. One of them is finance capital, which corporates have, which the government has, and so on. But the second one is can we go back? For some reason, this one is going back is not working. Can we just go back one slide? The previous slide? No, the one just before that. These are the last 2 slides, so I'll be through. but we have to get the slide. एक slide पीछे जा सकते हैं लोग? ये बैटरी जाना, इसको escape करा के बैठ करें. Yeah, but the second form of, another form of capital is education or knowledge, right? And that is what professors have. So the thing that we were going with was that we got people whose market value was, let's say, very low, and then we taught them, and their own market value, they started making these things. And they started generating a huge amount. So, but to get them to that point, you need people who have been trained. So we ourselves, professors and teachers and so on, if they're doing it the right way, they represent a huge amount of capital. And every time they move out, so right after the World War, or even before the World War, in the late 1920s and early 1930s, when a huge number of Jewish scientists emigrated from Germany. Germany was the epicenter of all these revolutions that were taking place, the intellectual revolutions. But the moment these people moved out, there was a huge amount of capital moving from Europe into the US. And that was when American science suddenly took off. Before that, let's say in the 1920s, Europe was completely dominated. Einstein, Schrödinger, Heisenberg, Bohr. In physics, I'm just taking those, but in every other thing, in chemistry, in biology, Europe was completely dominant. But then suddenly, this whole 200 or 300 years of scientific tradition just overnight moved and migrated. And there was just a huge amount of capital shifting there. So there's a huge amount of capital in principle, but it's only in principle, it's not being realized. This is an example of the realization of that form of capital, of the knowledge base of the education, which is now being transmitted and brought in and used to generate value. Alright. And technology, of course, is with corporates, but to a great extent with profs and the right types of profs. There are also issues with marketing. So even after we developed it, and we managed to survive by actually developing it and then selling all of these things. But the selling is has been a bit of a nightmare because you see, this is not like selling vegetables or something that people know what to do with. When I thought that after we had dissolved these atoms and made the STM, we were through. But all the people we gave it to had never used an STM. They might have been reading about these microscopes, but they never used one. They didn't know how to use it. And that whole burden was on us. If they couldn't get images of their samples, they said, your instrument is not working. So we had to figure out how to make them get images for their samples. So the change didn't stop at just building the whole thing. It went much further. And in fact, that is the key. Working out those applications. Now, a person will just take the thing and say, can I do this with this? Now, if we've done it, we just show it to them. Yeah, sure, we just do it for you. But the other possibility is that you say that, all right, in this paper, these people have used this instrument to do this. But there are conditionalities. They might have used it under some other circumstances and so on. So that is not necessarily convincing. And unless they're convinced that they can use it to do whatever they want to do, they won't buy it. So that's where the marketing problem comes in. And then, of course, you can raise awareness and all that stuff. That's the usual pattern of marketing, but that's a small part. The main thing is here. And this one right now is forcing us to set up entire labs to try to solve the problem. And then, of course, the rest of it, you have to distinguish between marketing and sales. Sales are just tenders, budgets, negotiations, and all that stuff. Finally, this is the last slide, or at least I think it is. Now, right now, one of the things that we are doing as soon as we're building up all these applications, we need chemicals. So here is a whole entrepreneurial idea.
I would say that this is there is an idea for how you can change the teaching so that it becomes focused on value generation. And let me pose the problem this way. Right now we buy all the chemicals that we need. I mean, we moved on to producing samples and so on which we are doing research, all right? If we want to use those samples, for instance, to produce solar panels and things of that sort, all right? We are going to, we will have to start with certain chemicals. Now, all those chemicals will come from Sigma Aldrich, from Advisor, from Merck, and so on, right? These are all from MNCs and everything being done there. The whole knowledge base is there. And what happens is the prices go up very non-linearly with purity. If it's 99%, it's like 1,000 rupees. 99.9 is 4,000. 99.99 goes up. By the time you come to 99.99999, I mean 5 of these, it goes up to beyond a lakh. Now, question. Can we just buy this thing, the 99% one, and purify it to this? If we do that, then the difference is 1 lakh, right? And that would be our knowledge base. So we've taken this, that's the raw material, and we've purified it. And the thing that we now have is worth a lakh. So that you can start making money from this. But you have to know how to purify it. You have to be able to identify those particular impurities. So the biggest obstacle is the knowledge base. And as far as I've been able to make out that knowledge base is completely missing, people don't know how to do it. And that's why we have to, and then of course you also need, as it becomes more and more, refined, you need better and better instruments. So you need those instruments. And then the question is, can we compete? Now, if we are able to refine it, then we will be able to compete. But we have to know, what is the price at which we are able to refine it, and what will the models be? I mean, we are having to think about this because as this thing expands, the expense goes up too much. So we have, we are tempted to get into chemistry and just figure it out. Just figure out what these guys are doing. But if you look at the manual for Sigma Aldrich, it's a thick book like that, with, it's really dense, and they have maybe 10,000-15,000 chemicals inside that. The question is, they can't possibly have all of those in stock. So but they know how to do it, and they can supply it. So if you order it, they ask for 6 weeks. In the 6 weeks, they'll probably make it for you and give it to you. And so you have to have specific business models which will make this work. But this would be a very useful thing to do. Alright. It would completely start freeing us of these companies. And the whole knowledge base would go into mining and mineralogy and purification of both of the metals and of thorium that we can mine in Kerala and so on. So this is something that we are thinking about, and we'd love to have people who are also interested in doing this. Okay, so that's it. I mean, at the moment, those are a few remarks and at least some idea of our experience with entrepreneurship. For this stage talk.
And it is very nice experience he has shared, and how from theoretical physics move towards the development of devices, and whole journey in a 40-45 minutes that is described, and of course it encourages to us. If any questions, quickly we'll ask please. Any question, query?
I have a question.
Comments or objections?
No, not objection, but a question, like
Sure.
curiosity, non-science curiosity.
Right.
So you initially gave a ballpark picture where you compared 5 lakh with some 1.5 crore or something, and some port, right? That they already had a purchase order for over 1 crore, and you were talking about it.
Oh no, they are working for the same thing.
For the NPL, for the same thing.
No, not for the same thing.
For a similar thing.
No. It was for something completely different. They had a 6 crore order, and there was some fluctuation in the dollar that gave them an extra 5 lakhs. They ordered our instrument in that extra 5 lakhs. So the 6 crores was for something much more expensive. It had nothing to do with.
This was keeping in mind that conventionally in market, like if we are going for STMs, they're really expensive. Right? If you try
It is true right now.
So
I think that really disturbed us was that IIT Delhi has bought a more sophisticated STM, but for 16 crores. We said, man, for 16 crores we would have developed it, but it would have taken us time. I mean, all these other things of making it ultra,
no, with so
ultra
much
high
of
vacuum,
innovation
and then
right
taking,
now, already put in and about 10 plus years of
right, but the 10 years
as on date, how do the prices compare?
Oh, as of date,
still
right now, for the low temperature STM, from outside, it would be about a crore and maybe 35, and we are doing it for 40 lakhs plus tax, which is 5%, 2 lakhs of tax, and then transport and installation and warranties. So we also have to give the same 3 years of warranties, right? So it comes to about 45 lakhs.
So how still there is a huge factor of
It's right, but it's a bit like a friend of mine who said, "Oh yeah, real estate prices have come down in Jorba." I said, "Oh, what are they?" He says, "Oh, they were 800 crores, they've come down to 600 crores." So I said, "That's not altogether useful information. Yeah? You have to have 600 crores to buy the house first. Yeah? I mean, if it is, so it is. You still have to have the 45 lakhs to buy it, and the number of people who have it. Well, now maybe that number is not that small, but it is. So that's why the value for money is there. I mean, there are people, and what is helping is this Make in India business, because now you have to specify what. In our case, it's 90% is made in India easily, if not more.
Doctor, you mentioned that your instrument is sold in 5 lakhs and you were
No, that was 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
So even if you take the escalation, I think
Right now we're selling it for
escalation in the both sides.
Right. No. Right now we're selling it for. We've also added many features to it, and we put in a lock-in amplifier and so on. It's become 4 mode, and there are other things. So right now it's about 12 lakhs, 12 and a half lakhs.
And there is the crores of the in the bottom.
No, it's not.
So
It's about 30. It's about for the air STM with a lock-in amplifier and everything that they don't have actually. That has given us a certain advantage. But even if you do put in a lock-in and all that stuff, their price will go up to about 25 or 30.
And this large area scans through stitching like that you have.
No, the 30 lakhs, and so we are roughly at 1/3, which is a healthy ratio that we maintain. So if we are able to do it at 1/3, then but the real battle will come. You see, these are still slightly niche areas. I mean, the STM is not the same as the AFM. If we get the AFM fully done, then it's going to be an out-and-out battle. I mean, then they will also try to destroy us, and we have to be able to take the onslaught.
Yeah, that is what was my next kind of curiosity here. Like, so how much of competition in terms of like patent conflicts or something that you are facing from your established?
Well, not yet, not very much, because some of these patents are probably, I don't know whether they've expired or not. But you see, this business of what is it called, reverse engineering?
Yeah.
That is not necessarily that simple, because you then have to, there are parts of the thing which we've gotten working and which are working very well and probably better than they have gotten it working. Now we don't want to give that up in order to try to reverse engineer their thing, because when you reverse engineer, then you more or less have to follow everything that they're doing, and that doesn't really work. So this is one problem. The other problem really that I think by far the biggest problem has been that none of us knew how to do this stuff to begin with. All right. and I was a theoretical physicist. The only thing is that I didn't have the fear of failing, because if I failed, what would people have said? They would have said, oh, what do you expect from a particle theorist? So, I mean, in some sense, I was protected by being a theorist. So I wasn't worried about that. But now that we have figured it out, and at least in parts we're able to do it, we're able to train more people. And so the issue is not one of making the microscope, but of, let's say, of making the STM, but of making the people who can make the STM. But you cannot make the people who can make the STM without making it, right? That's the only way. So right now, for instance, in the company, the way we're able to train people is that the moment a person has stepped through the door, we give him something and say, start making this. And we'll tell you how to make it, but you start making. So the gap between, so the whole philosophy of education also is being revised. And that's something that we are actually right now trying to push. Because the way we are doing it in the IIT, I mean, I taught for about 20-25 years in IIT, all right? And the fact that there was a certain amount of impact, as you can see, if a guy turned down Princeton and Berkeley to come back and work here, and he was getting $100,000 there, and he came back for under $1 lakh out here, all right? So it did have an impact. People were getting convinced by it. But there are many problems with the teaching that like the one we were just discussing right now at lunchtime. That we needed to resolve. Yeah, sorry, you want to? All right, but we'll take a few more questions. We'll discuss that then.
One question I have.
We have.
I have for you as an entrepreneur.
Right. Okay.
So I came from Intel, IIT Delhi, then worked as a director there. And then
in the Intel Center in IIT.
Intel R&D. And I worked
inside IIT.
Yeah, no.
Oh, outside.
Bangalore.
Okay.
I worked in Valley also.
Okay.
This fear which you told me had when I stepped into Broadcom Janker. And then I realized everybody is as stupid as I am.
Everyone has to be?
Everybody is as stupid as I am.
Right. That is
so suddenly this fear went away.
Right.
And then we saw that, and just quoting on the same points of what you were telling, that what's the price? Entire SoC system on chip.
Right.
We designed in India. And we started selling that at a US price. I thought this is bullshit.
Right.
You got to design in India, you have to sell a price for India.
Right.
That's a big fact.
Right.
Finally, we convinced them that go to GU and sell them, and got the order.
Right.
But the problem is, today 90% of the system, the way you are designing, Cisco and Intel also, they design in India. And they start selling at a price that, like, overburdened, and we get scared that whether their quality is good. Their quality is absolutely not. In my experience, I work very closely with Israel. That's what I learned with them, that you must go and market before you go to manufacture, and you will get order.
Right.
So very good.
What we've had to do very often is we've taken the order first.
Yes.
And only then have we developed.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've taken the order without knowing whether we can or cannot develop.
One part was the same.
But under that pressure, we've ended up finally
Most of the
developing.
instrumentation company does like this. They will ask you what you want to learn, give them order 50%, 60%. They develop almost all instrument of this group.
Sir, I am telling you, chip, and I am a cyber security guy. We have broken out all the countries without us trying that, okay, let's do that.
But this, you see,
so it's okay.
the
It is almost 7, so sir, if you will allow, we can discuss.
I have one small.
yeah, all right.
Okay.
Well, since people right now do want to ask questions, we might as well take them.
May I know your any model that you have developed in last 10 years?
For-
This is very important for new entrepreneurs.
Right,
When
for-
you are training.
All right. So, see, I think that we do need to discuss these points because they are. I remember that in one of the conferences, the person was given only 10 minutes. And he says, well, I've solved this very important problem, but given only 10 minutes, I can't discuss it. And so he went through the talk. At the end, somebody says, all right, any questions? They said, what was that problem you had solved? So it's like that. All right. Now, so I think that you see, it's a question of how we have to change the way in which we are teaching. See, that's why I gave the example of analytic chemistry. I mean, there are 2 or 3 courses on how to analyze what the different components and do it through titration and this and that. But that generates no value. What I would do is I would buy this stuff for 1,000 rupees, alright, and 99% purity, and I'd say, I want you to make it 99.99. First just make it 2 nines, then 3 nines, then 4 nines. Identify all the contaminants, all the impurities, figure out how to remove them, and then check that they have actually been removed. So set up this whole procedure. If you have to do that, you will learn a huge amount of chemistry. Within the company, that's how we would do the teaching. Now here, of course, the structure is very rigid, so if you started doing this, you'll start getting phone calls from the director. Fortunately not here, but but you will get those phone calls. So, I mean, but that is what is required, because after you've taken them through that process, many of them will be able to do certain things. But also the second thing is that I think the whole idea of individual entrepreneurship is not a great idea. You have to teach people how to work in teams. I mean, this whole thing, everything that we are doing, it requires massive bandwidth. You need electronics, you need software, you need mechanical engineering, you need physics, and you need all the MBA subjects. All these issues of how to manage the finance. The moment the salaries stop, the whole thing will start coming apart. Just how to manage the finance itself and keep track of it. So there are so many, and you need a team of people doing it. If you don't, and people don't know how to work in teams, you put them together, they'll have a fight in 2 days. So, I mean, there's somebody who put it very, very well. He said football would be very easy to play if you didn't have to score. Then everyone would be kicking the ball somewhere. It is getting it coordinated and scoring the goal that takes all the effort, right? That coordination. So we have to teach them teamwork. We have to teach them this whole reorientation of the courses is required. Now at least there is some sort of a thrust that people are saying, all right, we should move in this way. But these are it's taken a long time. I mean, Ajay was saying, all right, it's taken us 10 years. But it took 10 years to build the team. We brought in these people who were doing computer science, and they immediately concluded, because they have a higher market value. They said, oh, our work is much more difficult, and therefore we should, even within the same team, they're doing, so they wanted to have a totally privileged status in the team. And in a short while, the whole thing broke up. We said, look, I mean, your demands are unreasonable. It was much easier for other people to learn the stuff and get it done. So I mean, I can pass on many of these aspects of experience, but what रात में कर लेंगे हम लोग? अच्छा, okay, yeah, go ahead.
In this, one of the aspects you brought about is skill development.
Right, inevitably.
And within that, you also talked about the role of language, teaching.
Right, absolutely.
Even practicing engineering.
Right.
So, what do you think that ours, Make in India has not been very successful? Is there some aspect to it, to teaching in English or regional language? Not just Hindi.
But in our case, it didn't come in that way. It came because you were talking to people who had the manual skills, and you had to explain कि ये चीज बनानी है.
But that is what Make in India actually needs.
But we had to get it done. So now, if suppose you didn't, and by the way, it isn't only stuff that is happening in the company. You have to identify other people who have CNCs. I mean, these, you know what CNC machines are? They're the computer numerical, whatever it is. I mean, they're automated dates and so on. But the people working on them speak Hindi. Now, if you don't speak Hindi and you go there with your English accent, you say, oh, well, can you, the guy won't even listen to you. You have to, there is a certain working relationship that you need with that person. You have to slowly build up this whole network which goes way beyond your own company. You have to be able to talk to people at many, many levels. I mean, the technology can't develop in a vacuum. So to get back to Avlen, your thing also, Avlen. Yeah. पटना में भी लोगों को आइडेंटिफाई करना पड़ेगा, वर्कशॉप्स को आइडेंटिफाई करना पड़ेगा जहाँ पर काम कराया जा सकता है। क्योंकि ये है कि सारा कुछ इन हाउस करना तो संभव है नहीं। और वहाँ से लोगों से करा रहे हैं काम, और वो उनके से पार्ट ऑफ द टीम, पार्ट ऑफ द ओवरऑल टीम।
We make the full household firewall.
Right.
Just with the lower line of India is to
Right. Right. But so that's where the language starts coming in.
That's right, I agree. I mean, I've also worked there, so Pina is one. Then you go to Tamil Nadu, they are they go to talking Tamil.
Right.
So, you know, the northern part of this country, it lags behind in this.
Right, so this thing of actually ordering of, ITK is, and that's why the thing bothered me, because now we have air conditioning. Last week we want to air condition the hospital. You're cutting it off completely from the surroundings. And the communication also start getting cut off. So it becomes much more difficult. So there are lots of issues. So I mean, it's very nice to hear people giving political speeches. We are solving it at a practical level. And I'm not talking in the air. I mean, we show you these results. Now, I mean, if we want to take it one step, lower to let's say liquid helium temperature, very much closer to absolute zero. We know exactly what the difficulties are, and we know how. I'm thinking about how to build the team that can take it. But anyway, these are still things that we are doing for ourselves as physicists and for the physics community in India. The other forms will be things which have a much bigger market than our consumer items and so on.
Today, we can continue this discussion tomorrow.
Right, but we should now stop. Yeah, we will.
Because you also have to go to Maria.
Okay, that is true.
So thank you so much, Professor Sardev. Now I would like to request Professor Pitam Kumar to give a token.
Oh yes.
Token of momentum or his Thank you so much. And I think this one is the last session.
Thank you all for joining us. So that is the end of the day. And we will be meeting again tomorrow at 9:30. So see you all tomorrow. Thank you all.